Good afternoon, Smite fans, and welcome to day one of the Smite Pro League playoffs powered by Alienware. I'll be your host for today, Taco, and obviously joined here by Mifflin. But Mifflin, before we get into any of today's action, just want to go ahead and remind you guys back at home, a lot of this gameplay being brought to the pros thanks to our friends over at Alienware. So make sure you stop by smitegame.com/Alienware, use code SMITEAW, make sure you plug for your very own Alienware because you could have a nice PC, you could have a nice laptop. I know I'm pointing at the laptop first, but PC's on the mind as well because they are pretty sick. And Mifflin, obviously, with the Alienware stuff, all that going on, I wanted to bring your attention to the fact that we saw some premier gameplay, I think, throughout those group stages. And now that we're moving into the actual playoffs action, just want to remind you guys back at home that a lot of what took place was a little bit of an upset.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't expecting the Bolts in particular to come out undefeated. I know they've been on the rise recently. I know they've really hit their stride, especially coming into playoffs, but this is ridiculous considering how stacked Group A really is. The Bolts are the standout for me.
For me, I think that both of these sides were relatively stacked. It all just depends on which teams you ask, in my honest opinion. But looking at the schedule for today, obviously we'll be kicking things off with the Atlantis Leviathans versus Solar Scarabs. And now, this is a set to really keep an eye out for. Granted, we're going to have the Tartarus Titans facing off later today with those Jade Dragons. But match number one, Leviathans versus Scarabs. This could really go either way, Mifflin.
It really could. Last time these two teams matched up, it was a 2-1 favoring the Leviathans, but I think that's more than the Scarabs really could have expected going into it. And I think now, especially this week, I don't know who's going to win. If you had asked me even 4 weeks ago, I'd say Leviathans free. 3-1 maybe, 3-2 if they're trolling. But now the Scarabs are a team that really can win just about against anyone. They're not really out of contention at all, and they're a team you need to keep your eyes on.
My favorite part about it all, too, is that the treat for both or either of these teams, whoever comes out on top, is getting to face off against those Olympus Bolts,
Yikes.
as you guys saw from that bracket run. So certainly not going to be an easy time for either side involved. But going a little bit more in depth with the Solar Scarabs, Mifflin, we've definitely been seeing them more on the rise. They are a team that's been notorious for being able to take games off of some of the more top teams in the league, as public standing would sit, and even as the actual standings would pose. But for you, at least, what do you think has been the main focus for the Scarabs in their recent rise?
I think it's that Zapman ability to just hang into a game. We're 8,000 gold down, 28 minutes in. I don't care. I'm going to sit in my Phoenix until the 50-minute mark. It's similar to how PK kind of had their run at Worlds. It's just that steadfastness, that willingness to just dig in your heels and say, all right, you might beat us, and it might be a 99%er, but I'm going to make you work for that 99%. And when you drag games out that long, people are going to make mistakes. It's going to give you those opportunities to work your way back in.
Well, one of the only ways to really drag a game out that long comes down to the actual supports and the front line that are trying to assist those carries in that late game aspect. And when it comes to supports, I think that Inbound is certainly a member who has definitely been making waves lately for this Scarabs roster.
Yeah, we've got two versions of Inbound that I've seen, and it's the I'm going to dominate you with these aggressive picks, the Herculeses, the Ymirs, the Surcat lock-ins, and just look for those invades on cooldown. And then sometimes we see Inbound kind of overstepped his bounds, go a little bit deep on these more sustained.
Is that an intended pun?
Yeah, completely intended. I actually wrote that down coming into this, but occasionally we'll see Inbound stumble a little bit with over-aggression, but in recent weeks, he's really nailed it down. It doesn't happen nearly as often as it used to.
For me, it feels like what Inbound has really done best for himself and for his team, honestly, is just the fact that he has leaned more into that aggressive side of his support gameplay, and this whole roster, I think, just works best whenever they have someone that can just be such a controlling, direct force.
Yeah, and that's something that Inbound did last year. Back in Season 7, he came in with that consistent, aggressive style, and as the years kind of waned on, as we moved into Season 8, he's kind of tried to adapt a little bit more so to that traditional support role, incorporating Yamojas. Occasionally we'll see a Kepri or something along those lines, but I think you're absolutely right. I want to see him running it down. I want to see the Surcats and the Hercs.
Well, fortunately for us, we're actually going to get a chance to pick Inbound's brain here, because he's going to be joining us for this pregame interview. And Bobby, first things first, day one of the playoffs, what's on the mind right now?
I don't know. I'm just excited to play. Like, the worst part about, like, game days is just, like, that 10, 15, 30 minutes before a game, and just, I don't know, you're just excited to get into game. Yeah.
Well, it's obvious that the anticipation's been really real for you and the rest of the team, but what are some things that we could maybe expect to see from you guys today against the Leviathans? Like, has the team just been nervous just about the fact that the game's about to happen, or is it the competition itself?
No, it's just like the anxiousness before getting into a game, and I don't know, it's just gonna be like a lot of running it down, most likely. Hopefully not me getting caught out too much. Good running it down, but yeah, we're not really nervous about who we play. It's just like that anticipation about getting into the game is like all it's coming from.
And just as a direct support question, I suppose, where do you feel the most comfortable right now in the meta?
I definitely think the meta is just shaping up to this more, I don't know, like aggression out of the duo lane, and I think it's playing around the duo lane, and then if duo lane pressure doesn't work out, you kind of just opt elsewhere, but the prio is in the duo lane. Uh, and I think those early game aggression supports is like the big thing about it.
Well, definitely looking forward to seeing how you and Zapman fare against the Leviathans duo lane later on today. And thank you so much for joining us for this pregame interview. Best of luck to your team heading into the playoffs day one.
Thank you.
That's a nice guy, man. Inbound always just knows how to have that camera appearance, I think. Because the confidence is there. It's really just the anticipation, Mifflin, that seems to be the worst part about it all.
Yeah, Inbound, I think he kind of choked up a little bit. You asked him if he was nervous, and he was like, well, no, not really. And that's just the type of guy Bobby is. He really is just a confident player. And he said he thinks the dual lane aggression meta is really what's going to come through here this week. That's a good meta for Bobby. I want to see him keep up with that.
I'm really excited, honestly, to see how these two teams are going to face off in that duo lane. I'm glad that Inbound made it evident to all of us back at home that he's just going to be looking to prioritize whatever he can to give Zapman a lead. And you can imagine that Rongyu, probably one of the prime candidates when it comes to support play, catering to their ADC.
Of course. And when you talk about aggressive duo lanes, can't not talk about the Leviathans with Yarkor moving into that ADC role. No one's jumping on lane as often as Yarkor. No one is dashing in as aggressively as Rongyu. And this pick in particular, this Ymir, I think elevates Rongyu and his entire team to another level. This guy is so good at controlling space, confirming objectives, and then just finding these phenomenal walls. I mean, there was a SMITE Reddit clip put out a couple weeks ago of just a hypercut of me saying, nice wall, when Rongyu's playing. And, well, they had a lot of clips because he does it so often.
And it's not just the Mir that has that wall capability. The Yamoja as well, I'm sure to be a highly sought-after pick ban in this set because Rongyu really just seems like a support player that understands how to do it all. We have seen him on the more aggressive picks like this Venmir. We have seen him on the more space-dominant controlling options such as the Amir and Yamoja. But when it comes down to it, Mifflin, Leviathans versus Scarabs in that Guardian aspect solely, who do you think really gets to come out on top here? Because these are two pretty different playstyles because Rongyu is more for the team, Inbound's a lot more for the team too, but just in a much more aggressive manner.
I would have to say that Rongyu has the consistency edge over Inbound. He is consistently finding greatness on aggressive picks and on facilitator picks. So I think as far as a betting man would go, you probably bet Rongyu this time around, but that's not to say that Inbound doesn't have those same peaks. He doesn't have the ability to play to that high level because he absolutely does. But I am a betting man, and I would bet with Rongyu.
Well, luckily for us, Mifflin, we'll get a chance to see exactly how these two teams intend on drafting as we're heading into picks and bans for game number 1. And a friendly reminder for anybody who missed out, group stages were best of 3s, but these playoffs will entirely be best of 5. So it's not just about who comes out hot first. You always have that run it back potential, and that's something that I think both of these teams are definitely going to keep an eye out for.
I think taking best of 5 into account, gotta favor the Zap team, right? These guys, if you're talking about PK or any Zapman team in the past, they do not lose best of 5s, or at least if they do, it goes all 5. I think the Solar Scarabs are a team that is very resistant to tilt as well. They really do keep their heads on their shoulders, especially in these high-stakes situations.
It's really just going to boil down to how quickly the Solar Scarabs can recognize and adapt to whatever it is that the Leviathans decide to bring out. And no shocker at all so far, Mifflin. We're seeing Ymir band out, we're seeing Emoja band out, and then contrasting to that, Leviathans seem like they have their eye a little bit more catered towards the carries and a different aspect of the front line, that King Arthur band. So it seems like teams are finally taking into account that King Arthur, just no fun to really play into.
Just so much dominance in lane, has more abilities than the majority of gods in Smite, so really gets a lot of value out of Bluestone. And Soul Lane, being the Bluestone meta that it is, kind of don't want to have to deal with that one. So it makes sense to me that the Leviathans are kind of just targeting out the meta picks, whereas the Solar Scarabs definitely have their eyes on Wrong Yu. I mean, you brought up both of these picks earlier on. Ymir and Yamoja both scream Wrong Yu to me. So where the support's going to fall back to? Bobby still has his Surcat and his Hercules available, and the Leviathans, I mean, Wrong Yu can play whatever he wants, but it's kind of screaming to me, maybe we see some Horace.
A wise decision, though, from the Scarabs to make sure that Tiamat doesn't find its way into the hands of Shinto, and a little bit of a switch up here even for the Leviathans. They've always had a more tendency, I think, to prioritize Julio's pick early on, but it seems as though they're leaving the Kokolin option as a flexibility choice here. But Scarabs, Fenrir, that's been a top pick for them, and it's an excellent flex pick choice because he could really go solo, jungle, or support, although I'd anticipate it to probably be a little bit more intended for inbound here.
But with the Gilgamesh lock-in, I think that does essentially say Gilgamesh jungle, Fenrir support, not really feeling it inside of that solo role, but this doesn't leave a lot of ambiguity, and it gives the Leviathans the opportunity to get themselves a top pick. Chiron is a pick that has skyrocketed in recent weeks, especially with the recent Transcendence buff, the Bluestone meta. If we're talking about dual lane aggression, can't do much better than the Horse God.
And we have seen Medusa as a response, although that's not really a god that screams Zapman to me. Possibly on her pick could be in the works here, or even a Jingwei just looking to bring some of that late game viability here, because the Solar Scarabs right now, their top end just seems very early to mid game focused, and I'm liking the shape up from the Leviathans because there's some early game, there's some mid game, and then there's a great transition into the late with the Raijin Chiron team fight capability.
Yeah, I'll be excited to see what the Leviathans elect to pick up inside the jungle to really see which point of the game they're trying to focus in on. As you already highlighted, they've got good adaptability right now, but the next couple of picks will really tell us what they're aiming for. Maybe it's that signature sanguine 25-minute team fight, or maybe we're going to see a little bit of that new age Leviathan Season 8 early game aggression.
Well, I am liking the setup that is already in play here for the Raw, and assuming that that's intended for Baron. I can't really see a Raw going into the Soul, and this isn't ranked by any means, but Raw could potentially struggle against the Kokolin, considering that he already has that built-in anti-heal with the Barbed Spear. Could pose some issues, but when you have a front line like Fenrir and the Gilgamesh, Fenrir could always play Go Fetch for that Raw, and not only that, but I really just like that Raw ultimate in response to the Raijin Taiko drums.
Just so easy to hit him once he goes into the Taiko drums, essentially rooting himself how slow he does move. And Ra's got a sneaky good matchup into Chiron. Use the ultimate, find the Vengeful Strike. The second ability, that's slow. Well, now Divine Light gets you out of that very easily, and you can utilize the Ra passive to just kind of maneuver around the map relatively safely. If you take a peek at the Leviathans, if it is going to be Kokolin's job to zone out this Ra, after he uses the ultimate, after that Barbed Spear, well, there's not many ways that he can really keep up with this guy.
Do you think it's a little bit bold to take Chiron into the Fenrir as well, knowing full well that Giddy Up is not going to be able to create any sort of space from that Brutalize?
It is, but he does have the training exercise to at least peel out for his teammates and things along those lines. So Chiron gonna have to play a little bit slow around this Fenrir, but if Fenrir is using Ragnarok on literally anyone else, that cleanse is gonna be huge.
My favorite part so far, though, out of the Scarabs roster, it's definitely high execution oriented. Don't get me wrong, Mifflin, but seeing Fenrir, Gilgamesh, and Surcat,
Fenrir solo?
where are you mixing and matching these god pick selections for?
It's gotta be Gilgamesh jungle, Fenrir solo, and then we get to get the signature inbound Surcat support if I had to guess. But now that we've seen this four-man core, this is an incredibly ambiguous draft. I mean, Gilgamesh could go into the jungle, could even go into solo. We've seen FineOK have a lot of success out of it there. It's going to be hard to lock down, and now the Leviathans have to think pretty hard about where they want to go.
And a Horace going to be locked in now for the Leviathans. That's actually a surprising switch up. Horace is someone who we saw him have his heyday during Season 7, but has definitely fallen out of the spotlight throughout the duration of at least Phase 1 here. in Season 8, Mifflin. And so, looking at this Horace pick selection, who do you think it's intended for into the Solar Scarabs composition?
I think it's got a really good matchup into both Fenrir and Serket, who have to kind of commit their bodies for an extended period of time to find the damage. You get the Death's Kiss into the 1 from Serket. Well, I mean, Horace stun or knockup should be able to stop that combo. Brutalize is going to be very easy to stop out as well. And then you just have that huge mobility that's afforded to your team by that ultimate. I really do like Rongyu on this pick. And when he does lock it in, it's an incredibly aggressive early game pick. And it's going to match up incredibly well with Yarkor's Chiron.
And it seems as though the Leviathans, I think, just have a slightly easier time as far as general initiation and reinitiation is concerned. A couple of really big knockups coming into play here to funnel into beneath them on this Awilish pick. Excited to see how this Horace is going to match up, though, into the Serket. I am, honest to God, assuming that this is Serket for the support role there for inbound, just because she has so much mobility, could play heavy harassment around some of those early buff invades, and I think that's actually going to be Fenrir for layers.
Maybe. It could work out, and Layers definitely has a Fenrir. I've been on the receiving end of that one plenty of times. He's incredibly good at this pick. But you were right, Taco. The Medusa lock-in for Zapman, it's not something I really do associate with his play style, but it is, again, that aggression out of the dual lane. It really does fit. It feels like both of these teams are going to be coming out of the gate swinging haymakers.
If there's ever a time to shake it up, I think that Game 1 of the playoffs, setting the tone and setting the momentum for the match, or for the set entirely, you never really know just how much it can work into the opposing team's head depending on how controlling Game 1s can be. But when it comes down to it, Mifflin, just looking at these drafts outright, who have you got your money on for Game 1?
It depends. If the Solar Scarabs get off to a good start, almost similar to how the Bolts play, if they're able to get that first rotation of purple buff invade, if they're able to get into the enemy red buff, it's going to be really hard to put the brakes to the Solar Scarabs team once they get the ball rolling. But if this does go to that late game team fight, I gotta still favor the Leviathans. They just got great AoE, fantastic peel for their own team, and the ability to maneuver the map. Plus, just decent knockups to set up for this Awilish. Gravity Surge off a Horace knockup, or even the Giddy Up from Chiron if you're absolutely nuts. Could be a big detriment for the Solar Scarabs.
Do you think that the Serket could almost be like a bait and switch here for beneath them, though? Because you have to assume that inbound might not be looking to prioritize. If he is on the Serket, he might not be looking to prioritize that purification beads early on. And if all of the focus is constantly being placed into killing the support, well, supports are used to falling behind. So do you think that that could pose an issue for the Leviathans if they just try to put all their focus onto the Serket?
It could, but that's on the Leviathans to recognize, all right, look, we've killed the Serket a couple of times. It hasn't really done anything for us. Let's go ahead and switch our target. It's pretty easy to make that adaptation. So I'm sure the Leviathans, a veteran team, not going to get dragged into that one.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how these two teams are actually going to fare here, Miff. And I guess some final thoughts. What is one thing that you're looking at to come out of this first game?
I'm going to see which team's going to get proactive first, because whoever comes in with more energy, as you already highlighted, momentum's so important, especially in a best of 5. Keep your eyes on it.
Sounds great, Mifflin, but more importantly, Dulcin, Gore, I know you guys are going to sound even better for game number 1.
It's one of the best times of year. Playoff Smite finally kicking off here in Season 8. And what a way to start things off. Solar Scarabs versus the Atlantis Leviathans. My name is Dulcin. Goremiser's with me. Doug working the camera for this first best of 5 set here in this weekend. And Gore, for the Solar Scarabs, the playoffs effectively started last week in a do-or-die matchup against the Camelot Kings.
Yeah.
The Solar Scarabs did. And if they're able to beat the Leviathans here today, I think it'd still be argued as an upset, but maybe less so than it would have been at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, they've been playing on the lose and go home for over a week now as they've been waiting for it. Things are going to be interesting, and a mask starting there for SOT as well, making sure that things are a little extra spicy. But this is a matchup, before I dive too deep in there, Fighter's Mask. I'm interested to see what he builds that into, but before we get too deep into it, this is the one that I think I'm most interested in. Because this matchup feels like it has so much weight behind it. The Scarabs, a team that, again, kind of fought tooth and nail to be here and didn't have maybe the cleanest path all the way here with that do-or-die set at the very end of the week last week. But also, this is where the Leviathans tend to choke. Granted, new year, new clean slate, give you a whole new sheet of paper, all that. But if you look at what happened last year, they dominated in Phase 1 and then crashed in Phase 1 playoffs. They dominated, well, maybe not as much in Phase 2, and crashed in Phase 2 playoffs. They got to Worlds, and we'll just not talk about the rest of it because the Knights were the conversation there. I'm worried about that happening again. Right. I want to see this team find success the way that they are able to pretty much every regular season game. The question is just whether or not they're going to be able to bring it today.
Right, feels like that's the last thing that this team has to prove to us is that they can show up all weekend long in one of these tournament events. And in a best-of-5 set, the dynamic certainly does change. Your mental's going to get tested at some point. That was the storyline in Season 7 Worlds there with PK. So Scarabs, though, this is a team that will maybe start to catch you off guard a little bit in how their play style can change and adapt. They've really enjoyed getting aggressive early on in some of these games, then not letting those types of leads slip away. I think the mid lane matchup's going to be pretty interesting here, Gore. The Ryzen has started to see this rise of play, and Leviathans specifically have enjoyed this pick in the past. I'll hold that thought, though, as inbound, dove on, and deleted by Yarkor. Your first blood of the Phase 1 playoffs goes to the Leviathans.
I mean, this lane is going to be good at finding lockdown like that. Unfortunately, it's a give and take, right? You grab this Circuit, you get an assassin in the duo lane, and there's a lot of setup potential for you, especially around level 5. Granted, that's going to take a little while for support, but that's typically what you're bringing, right? You have the Kiss for setup in terms of a taunt. You've got a lot of damage that you're going to be able to bring to the table, as well as set up Zapman for success. But you can tell that inbound is still a little squishy. That's part of the problems of Circuit here.
It's an interesting pick, isn't it, that inbound is going to bring, hopefully, to the forefront here for the Solar Scarabs. The Hercules worked so well, that aggressive in-your-face play style, as you've brought up there, Gore, something that inbound has started to make work. I mean, talk about player growth, right? I mean, inbound, a tough year in Season 7, tough start to the year here in Season 8, but over the last few matchups that the Solar Scarabs have had, even in a loss, they've tended to go to 3 games, and inbound absolutely a driving force there. Bit of a different look at a matchup over here in the solo lane as well, with King Arthur finally getting banned out. We'd wondered how that matchup might change and adapt in picks and bans. There's plenty of conversation around, can you afford to ban out the King Arthur? What are you leaving open at that point? Sort of back and forth in that regard. Gilgamesh seems like a pretty solid slot end, though, for SOT here in the solo lane.
Yeah, and I'm curious because he's building into this Rangda's mask, and I just want to see how this goes for him, because this is one of those things that, I mean, yes, you're technically going to be able to bop a lot harder in the late game fights, but you're going to take a lot more damage. Gilgamesh has been pretty survivable up to this point, though.
Yep.
So it'll be fun to watch. Interesting to see it come at the very beginning, although he hasn't upgraded it yet, and he went for those boots. Maybe that's a cost efficiency thing. Maybe it's just to be able to have that 40 physical power early on, just a good starter for him. So I'm excited to watch how that evolves as time goes on. But Gilgamesh feels like the slot in, like you said, King Arthur Cucullin has been the one. It's kind of the meme matchup as of right now.
I think you said it was, what, 22% of the matchups in Season 8 were between those two?
They had played 21 total games where they were against each other out of 95 in Phase 1. And it was a 12-9 win ratio, which, simplify that, what is that, 4-3?
Something like that.
Something like that in favor of King Arthur. Just having a couple of games up on the Cucullin. Right. So ultimately, he wins a little more. Makes sense that he's going to be the one that's banned, but Cucullin is definitely still someone that you have to be worried about.
Absolutely. Shinto, looked at by inbound here in the mid lane, but the Raijin will walk himself away. And so now we start to get to this point in the game, Gore, where the Circuit and the Horace are going to rotate around this map, and that's where this early stage of the game is going to change, isn't it? Where inbound is able to find small engages like that into what has to be follow-up then from Layers and Baronic if you're looking at the mid 3v3. But Rongyu on this Horace terrifies me. Whether you're talking about an engage over on the right-hand side, whatever it is, if it's the ultimate in to that mid lane or anywhere else, I think Rongyu, for my money, might be the best Horace player here in the league that we have, and that's something the Solar Scarabs have got to have in the back of their mind. Once that level 5 mark gets reached, you got to expect something from Rongyu here in the early stages of this game.
And it did get hit with some nerfs. Last year, Rongyu was, like you said, one of the most phenomenal Horace players that we got to see, but it fell off with a couple of the nerfs. Around his ult, like of all things, like Horace, I would argue his ult is his least important part of his kit, but simultaneously his most important part of his kit. It is very, very good in the middle of a team fight if used properly, and that's what the Leviathans did. They used it properly. So I'm excited to see what they're going to be able to do with that, but his heal is going to be very crucial. My still favorite of this, and this is across all supports, you'll hear me talk about it whenever it comes up, but having any sort of protection shred, especially as a frontline, feels really good when you're going up against... I mean, look, inbound, even though you're an assassin, even though you're going to be building tanky, shredding some prots from a Circuit means that she's going to die a lot quicker. Same thing for Layers there. And if SOT finishes that Rangdas eventually, that means him as well, maybe even more so because of the Rangdas passive. And so there's a lot of problems that this Horace is going to introduce.
Panatom is rooted inbound down. A heal from Baronic over the wall, but look at this. Layers wants to chase in. Panatom has to use the beats. Oh, but Searing Pain connects. And Baronic now on the board for the first time for the Solar Scarab so far. Layers being chased down a little bit here by Yarkor. The up-down won't connect for the stun, but here comes Wrong You.
I mean, just shot after shot. One more is all it needs. He's looking elsewhere on the map. Now Zatman's in trouble.
There's a knockup over onto Zatman, but the Solar Scarab's collapsing on in. Some decent damage in on the backside of this fight as well, but looks like the Solar Scarabs are going to be able to get out alive. Shinto had considered rotating over from mid, but 1-for-1 trade, Gore. Leviathans even things up there on the back end.
Well, Wrong still being aggressive and actually forcing the ult out of Zap.
Oh, is he going to get detonated on the end of it? Of course he is, and Yarkor has found the damage. And now, for the second time this game, one of the duo lane members of the Solar Scarabs go down. Purple buff, a few seconds away from respawn. This is not the way the left side of the map wanted to go for the Scarabs.
Not at all. I mean, them being able to pick up so many kills for him. I mean, crucially early on, and on Chiron of all people that we've been seeing, I mean, countless amounts of success over the last couple of weeks. He has been popping off. That's the only term I can think of. I was trying to think of maybe a more clever, fancy way to say it, but I couldn't think of the words for it. Yarkor just looks good here. This pick in Chiron has looked really good over the last few weeks. You pair it up with a Horace. Wrong You. Well, I think a lot of people last year were rightfully saying Wrong You looked like and was one of the best supports, if not the best support in the league. He was at least rivaling for the top 2, top 3 conversation. And I have to agree. I mean, you look at the way he plays Horace, the way he plays Yemoja. Wrong You, a lot of the times the Leviathans win. You'll see Shinto pop off. You'll see Yarkor pop off. They'll have some great games, but it'll be Wrong You really guiding their hand. I just want to watch more of this Horace to see where it goes, if it can sustain this level of promise, or if it's going to fall off. I think as items come online, he feels a lot better. He does fit into that support role really well, but there's definitely going to be a little bit of a jump to get over for him coming in the next few minutes, especially as we start to see Inbound get a little more proactive with the Circuit.
It did end up being a purple buff invade there for the Leviathan's left-hand side. Wrong You picks up the buff. And now look at the trend that's been established over on the left-hand side. Inbound down by 2 levels. Zapman also down by 2 levels. So if you are Inbound or Zapman, you are in damage control mode right now. But this is what you've got to see from the Leviathans, isn't it? Where you've got a bit of a lead now working on this side of the map. Let's look for a red buff invade. Let's look for maybe a return invade over on the purple buff. Maybe start to consider a Gold Fury here at some point.
This is where the pressure can really mount up. And this is where things get more awkward for the Scarabs, right? So you're in a good position, I mean, aggressively positioned as well, if you're the Leviathans, like you said, and potentially being able to go for something like Gold Fury here soon. But even if you don't go for it, if you let the Scarabs think they have the opportunity, there's the drop ship that can come through from Wrong You, and that's just good engage as well. You want to fight deep in the jungle where they're getting aggressive around that red buff, around that purple buff, and then you just fall back onto the Gold Fury, whether it's with your ult or not. It's a really good engage. I think the Leviathans have that going for them here. There's nothing to scoff at on the Scarabs' team fight potential. That's where things get a little more awkward. Good, great secure, I would even go, for Baronic on the Raw. Really good setup for him in Inbound, Layers, and SOT. And that's where my eyes start to drift. The solo laners, Cullen we know is going to have a big impact. Gilgamesh has had a massive impact over the last few weeks. And so as they start rotating in, the Scarabs are maybe a little more triumphant. Granted, higher execution threshold, but definitely a solid fight.
Look at this, an immediate call from the Solar Scarabs to go onto the Pyromancer. How do the Leviathans respond? It's a collapse over on towards the Gold Fury. So Pyromancer secured by the Scarabs here, but the Leviathans are going to answer in kind with the Gold Fury over on the left. And maybe that's smart. If you're the Solar Scarabs, you got to fight away from maybe Zapman and Yarkor. It is just a 1-level gap now in both support and in Hunter as well. But maybe it's just a no-play zone over on the left, and the Leviathans able to secure themselves the Gold Fury. The Solar Scarabs maybe get the safer objective, Gore on the Pyro.
This is one of those things, it's like you said, safe, easy to secure, simple to knock down, but you're now in a position where that gold is slightly in favor of the Leviathans. Nothing to really write home about. I mean, it's enough that they are going to feel in the lead, but not enough that they're really running away with the game just yet. And that's where I think things are going to be solid. The Scarabs, granted, I will say Medusa, this is typically where her peak is supposed to be right now in this mid-game. The, let's say, level 8 to level 15 range is typically where she's the strongest, but that's not always, like, it's not scripture, right? It's not something that has to happen that way, has to be true every time. And I think that's something we might see here. It might just be facility. I mean, Zatman doesn't have to be the one doing all the damage. In fact, I mean, go to some of the games last week. He wasn't. For a lot of that set, he didn't necessarily have the biggest impact himself, but in the team fights, he was able to set up someone like Baronic or someone like Layers to have that huge impact.
Uh-oh, inbound. Stunned down by Rongyu here. Rongyu has the blink, as you'd expect on this horse, the ability to get aggressive without that ultimate. Ever so important. Red buff gets dropped down here, but it's by the Solar Scarab, so they want to rotate in, help out this left and mid side of the map as much as they can. Sovereignty picked up early on here, Goremizer, for this Horace. Maybe enough physical pressure early on in this game. Granted, we haven't seen a lot of it just yet from the Scarabs. Maybe Sovereignty helps out that back line stay alive a little bit longer.
I mean, look, Gilgamesh, Fenrir, Serket, and Medusa. All physical damage, all at least 2, 3 of them looking to dive the back line. You want prots for you, but more importantly, you want prots for everyone around you.
Inbound wants to fight, and it's Rongyu who's engaged on. Zatman weaving the damage in on the back end. Petrify flies just wide, and it's an up-down over onto the side. This has got to be a kill from the Solar Scarabs. Taking a little longer than they wanted, but Zatman able to pick up one nonetheless. Big collapse in from the Solar Scarabs, and they've pulled back one more for themselves, and that brings Zatman right back to even.
Again, gives them a good kill, gets everything done. It is 3 ults they have to use, but there's not a big fight that's going to be happening in the next few minutes, so they're going to be able to recharge those before any Furies, Pyromancers, what have you, respawn. But it is kind of telling how much they had to invest just to kill the support, and maybe even more so showcasing how important that Sovereignty is because of how tanky he was. Tank Boots facilitating some of that, but this is the good news, I think, actually, for both tanks, both squads here, is the fact that you're going to be able to grab 1 to 2 physical prot items, and for the most part, that's going to be the best thing that you're going to be able to have cost efficiency-wise, just due to the compositions.
Julio's going to get near max value, you have to feel like, out of the Stone of Gaia, at least in lane. It's allowing the Kukulkan to stay up and sustained. So now the Solar Scarabs, you wonder if they've done what they set out to do here, Gore, and that is keep themselves in this game after what was a tough start very early on. They still are just 1 kill down, a couple thousand in the hole as far as gold and probably experience go there, but none of the Leviathans players are totally fed off the chain carrying this game here at the moment. It's been a quiet game, admittedly, out of both junglers, but that being said, Layers is quietly falling behind here, Gore. It's a 2-level lead for Panatom.
Yeah.
You start to see some of that confidence maybe building up here as Layers loses some of his back camps.
Well, this is where things get a little more awkward, and this is something the desk had mentioned where they kind of wanted the Scarabs to be a little more active early on in this game, because this is where things are, I mean, for Fenrir not only, but also Serket in the duel lane. Like, you want to be a little more aggressive with a composition like this. That being said, I do still think they have some merits in a late-game team fight. I don't know if it's going to match up with the Leviathans, especially if it continues this 2-level gap in the jungle.
Blink's traded on either side of the map here, and it's Baronic in the mid lane who will use the Aegis. That'll keep him in the fight a little bit longer, but Rongyu staying active, staying in the face of the mid laner. That's such an interesting dynamic with Baronic here on this Raw. The move speed so crucial, and keeping yourself alive and out of the fray in some of those engagements. And so Rongyu uses the blink as well as Panatom, but no kills on the menu this time around.
I mean, just being able to get that Aegis is going to be solid. Still,
it's important.
Beads available, though. So maybe some of that CC going to get shrugged off. Baronic doing a good job just staying alive in instances like that, especially around the upcoming objectives. Pyromancer should respawn soon. Oni Fury is going to be spawning soon. Baronic has the best secure on the map when he is available and around. And as long as that ult's available, which for Raw is often, should be able to give a lot of contest to what the Leviathans are going to be bringing. And honestly, I think as of right now, it might be the best bet for the Scarabs. I mean, the way, like, unfortunately, inbound, he's only a level behind in comparison to where Rongyu is, but for Serket, you feel that a lot more. He's gone for the Thieves early as well, so not quite as tanky, not able to get into the fights as easily and survive as much. That health is nice, but it's not going to be the end-all, be-all for you. After this next item, next 2 items, I expect to start seeing a lot more out of the support. For Layers, it feels like it's either an item or just a proactive level of play that has to come up. But Baronic right now is going to be a single pillar along with SOT.
Might be seeing a run back of the previous call here. Solar Scarabs, they're on the Pyromancer, but Julio will have none of it. Rongyu moving in with his ultimate as the Pyromancer secured now by the Scarabs. But look at the back line. Julio makes quick work of Boronic over on the backside. Shinto with the taiko drums will try to survive and not fall to a similar fate. Inbound, pull back over the wall. It's massive disengage there from Panatom. Layers finally finishes off the kill, but it's a killing spree for the Chiron as Inbound goes down.
Layers is still getting chased. Panatom goes there, but that's jungle for jungle. 3 for 2 so far. I mean, just back and forth between these two teams. And ultimately, like, yes, you lose mid and jungle for mid jungle plus support. Slightly worse off for the Scarabs overall.
Do get Pyro.
It would be a little worse, yeah, if this Oni Fury went down in favor of the Leviathans, but I don't really have the secure for it now. So, not the best case scenario, not the worst case scenario. In fact, if anything, I think you're actually closer now in gold than you were prior to that. So, again, feels pretty solid for him overall. And until things start changing up for how they can tackle this, that is a great showcase of why you should be a little nervous if you're a Scarabs fan for this game going 25, 30 minutes.
Right.
Because while they still have good comeback potential and they're not out of the game, the collapse and the 5v5 from the Leviathans is very solid with this draft.
Well, that kill from Layers was very important as far as getting him back closer in levels to where Panatom is. It was a 3-level gap at one point. Now back down to just 1. Panatom has been living relatively free on some of the back camps that Layers had, and just prior to that fight, you kind of saw Layers on the minimap walking around with his hands up, searching for any sort of camp in his jungle to farm up, but it wasn't there. Now Oni Fury is still up, so the Leviathans were, I think, privy to the fact that the Solar Scarabs were doing the Pyromancer, but instead of rotating to the Oni Fury before, they chose to fight. Now the Leviathans realize the Oni Fury's still there and still a great chance to secure this objective. Boronic has Searing Pain, but his eyes are set on the mid camps instead, and the Leviathans will quietly snag a free Oni Fury.
I mean, that's almost exactly what you want in circumstances like that. You've been in the lead ever so slightly. Granted, technically now you've traded out a tier 1 for it, maybe a tier 2, but I don't know if they're going to have the push power here on the Scarabs to knock that one down. You get an Oni Fury, you're going to get a lot of pressure across the waves, you're going to be able to get aggressive. They're even potentially looking for blood right now. The blink coming through from Panatom, but not quite finding, I think, what he wanted. But Boronic, like, as much as Ra's movement speed is nice, and again, Zapman has a good disengage, all pretty easy to just dive on.
Inbound blinks towards Shinto underneath his own tier 1 tower. Wrong use there for the peel as Inbound has lost half of his HP. SOT pulled back in by the gravity surge, and Winds of Shamash separates this fight on out. But Yarkor has found the first kill, and there's way too much range on the backline, and Shinto will find the second. Leviathan search for the fight, and they get 2.
I mean, that is a clean fight for them. Under the tier 1 as well. Panatom getting out of there
they want more.
is important, and Wrongyu's going to bring them back in.
Into the skies and into the backline. Boronic has to try to disengage, but he's got no actives. And the last bit of damage from Panatom will meet its mark, and Inbound will slither on away, and the Leviathan save that re-engage ultimate gore for the perfect time. And Wrongyu drop ships the team. Now it's just Inbound and Zapman left on the map, and this is brutal. It's going to be a tier 1 over and right, maybe a tier 1 and left with the Oni minions, tier 1 and mid, and half of the tier 2. Big gold swing for the Leviathans.
I mean, a very good map pickup as well. Just the pressure that gives you. Yeah, it's enough to do something like this. I mean, what are the Scarabs going to do? They're missing 2 people, and yes, they could technically try to walk up to you and step to this fight. They will get demolished if somebody steps in here, and you can see they recognize that, maybe not even thinking they'd go for it, but the FG pretty easily burned down for the Leviathans there. And if you're looking at the swing, technically that tier 1's still standing over there and left, but
oh man,
I mean, you're looking at gold now heavily in your favor for the Leviathans. A very easy path down left to a Phoenix. Very easy in mid as well, since that tier 2 is already half health. This isn't going to have your backdoor protection strip. There's no EFG online just yet. That still needs a little under 11 minutes. But this is going to be a massive power swing, and it's on fights that have already been going in favor of the Leviathans.
Man, Yarkor has had a great start to the Phase 1 playoffs already. 4-0-2 on this Chiron. You can kind of see this issue, Gore, where the backline is felt maybe inaccessible to the Solar Scarabs, which is, you know, tough to say considering you've got a Fenrir and a Gilgamesh on your team, as well as Inbound with Blink, but Yarkor has effectively been left untouched in a lot of these fights. Shinto at 1-1-1 on the Raijin in that previous fight was able just to sit back and swing out damage. Granted, a lot of the fights have been pushing into the Solar Scarabs thanks to the Leviathans, but it's definitely an issue that you're going to have to find an answer to if you're the Solar Scarabs, especially under what is likely going to be a Phoenix defense here shortly.
2 Sentry Wards. I was watching specifically Panatom because he's the one who's fighting off wards. A lot to deal with on this left side of the map, but like you said, it's going to be a Phoenix Siege. And there's not a good position. I mean, the Scarabs are all back in base. A couple of people getting aggressive. With no minions, that kind of strips away some of the Leviathan's potential. In fact, they're going to go ahead and back off completely, go for a tier 2. And this is even more gold in their pocket. It's one of those calls that you don't really mind it no matter which way it goes, because no matter what, they're going to put themselves further in the lead. It just depends on map-wise or gold-wise. And they still have over 2 minutes on an FG buff, so they're going to be able to grab this tower. They could backspin, pyro, do whatever you want, then come back for a siege even stronger than what the Scarabs are expecting.
Is that the right call from the Scarabs, Gore, to just kind of forfeit tier 2s across the map? I mean, no real chance to fight in under a tier 2, right? Is the mindset there? We are more likely to lose the game based on gold.
Yes.
If we lose a fight under a tier 2. We have a better chance if we wait a little while and fight under a Phoenix after the next FG.
As much as it's unfortunate for the Scarabs, they were already losing fights under their tier 2s, and that was without a fire giant, right? I don't think I step up to the Leviathans in that case. I think the Phoenix is going to have to be the one that really holds on for you here. That 6-man that does a lot of damage when they're fighting under it. Granted, it's made it a lot easier. Again, Rung Yu has been able to stack up a lot of prots and health at this point where he's feeling very confident. And you haven't been able to see much out of the main carries from the Scarabs. I mean, Zapman's 1-1-1, and whereas he's third on the damage charts, he's actually been more crucial in this. But you had just pointed at it, and it's now to point out, look at the bottom left, there's a Fenrir and there's a Ra hanging out down there. That is not where you want to see those picks.
The literal opposite of what you want. Yes, wrong you. We'll bring the team right on into the Phoenix, and so our Scarabs aren't going to get the chance to defend the Phoenix. They're out pushing out the rest of this map. Tier 2 goes down and left. Half of Tier 1 and mid falls as well, and that is maybe the quietest Phoenix siege I've ever seen in my entire life. It's just a quick rotation in from the Leviathans. And Gore, you know, again, this is something that's in the players' heads. I don't know if that's the Scarabs asleep at the wheel or if they just didn't think they had a chance at defending that side of the map.
I think there's multiple reasons to go for a Phoenix defense there, but I have to say I agree, because, you know, if they lose a fight there, they lose the game. They lose the Phoenix there, they can still push out the waves and try to control it, although right now they're definitely under pressure elsewhere.
Panatom was trying to pull SOT in, but the beads get used. Nice sidestep from Solo or Troll.
Here.
Stun kicked onto the back end, and he'll drop the ultimate as well before he leaps on away. Panatom eats way too much damage. Baronic with the Searing Pain hit it, but the tick damage will not find it on the back end. And that is the strongest the Solar Scarabs have looked here in just a little while. Baronic with a big ultimate to maybe grab a pick on the Panatom, but won't be the case, and the Solar Scarabs delay out the remainder of that FG, and they might be looking to contest here in a minute.
Now, I will say, even though they use 3 ults for it and they don't get a kill, that actually feels like a win for the Scarabs. I put it in the frame that they're going to be defending over on right. Again, this is actually the best showcase. We always talk about the left Phoenix being the most important, and it's easy to think about, but this is why the right Phoenix is maybe the least important to lose, and that is because look at all the pressure they're now having over the Fire Giant buff. Like, I mean, you have to back off and defend Fire Minion waves over here. It's 10 steps to the left. Granted, you're still out of position, maybe not in the best spot for a fight, but it is going to keep you engaged in the game. But while all of that was going on, they lose that right Phoenix, etc., etc., Zapman opened up a path to the left Phoenix. It opened up something for the Scarabs to try and win off of. So now they're in another position like the Leviathans, where theoretically you knock down one team fight, one really good team fight, 3 or 4 members of the Leviathans gone. You could win the game off of that at this point. I mean, 25 minutes, you might be cutting it a little close if you just rush it down straight to the Titan, but you're still going to have a lot more chances than you had going into that. Especially with a 6,000 gold deficit, I think that they're still in this. They just have to figure out where they want to fight over the next few minutes.
Shinto eats a Searing Pain, uses the beads. Yarkor drops down the cleanse just to be doubly sure. Now in on the chase on the layers. We're going to need to see more out of this Fenrir over the last few minutes of this game if the Solar Scarabs are going to have a chance. Still lowest on the damage charts, 1, 3, and 2. It's been quiet from layers so far. SOT uses his ultimate again. The Taiko drums taunt the Gilgamesh back into the fight, and the health bar absolutely melting underneath the pressure of the Leviathans, and SOT will be roared to the grave as Layers attempting to disengage, but the drop ship is in, and Shinto will grab the Raiju. Ragnarok used for disengage, but Leviathans found one, and that's maybe all they need.
And if they can just open up this door, I mean, Layers is so low. This should be a Phoenix, even without Fire Giant, without backdoor protections being stripped. This is just something that's pretty easy to siege, and look how fast it's falling.
Yeah, Solar Scarabs don't put up any sort of defense under the left-hand side there without Gilgamesh, your most important frontliner. Not a real chance there for the Solar Scarabs. And so now you're maybe looking at a Fire Giant defense for the Solar Scarabs here. You might have to send Baronic forward with the Searing Pain to try to grab a steal. Those have been connecting. Baronic shooting up the damage charts just a little bit here as the Searing Pains have been connecting. But you got to do it in the important moments. You got to find those kills, find those fights. Maybe find a steal on the FG to keep the Solar Scarabs in game 1.
I mean, this is something that I think has been a good fight from the Scarabs, but you can tell it's just been a slow burn in favor of the Leviathans,
It's
right?
just kind of been the slow, listing in the wrong direction.
They are still in this area where I think they could fight. They could even win this Fire Giant fight and have a huge skirmish go their favor. But every 26 minutes that we have been in so far has felt like a slow but inevitable Leviathans win. I really need to see them grip the wheel and steer for a little bit here because the Scarabs are falling apart, at least at the seams right now. With one Phoenix finally respawning, though, they have a little more pressure over here on the right-hand side.
Fire Giant quietly reset. Fire minions pouring down the left-hand side. 2 waves are going to build up and push on into the Titan room. There's a fire wave on the right-hand side that's going to get looked at as well, and all the damage pouring into SOT, but Rongyu wants the backline, and Rongyu will have the backline. Baronic down as Panatom finds the opening kill. Zapman's going to get chased down as well. Game 1 is twilighting here, and the Leviathans will end up on top.
I mean, they're just looking for a couple more kills at this point. But they've got 3. They only traded out Shinto for it. Layers is 1 good hit from dead, and there's the deicide.
And the deicide comes through 27 minutes in, and the Solar Scarabs, they put up a bit of a fight there around the FG, Gormizer, but this just felt like a very quiet, consistent, clean win from the Leviathans, where it wasn't the kills that pushed them over. I mean, of course the kills pushed them over the finish line, but it was more the macro play, the decision-making, the stripping of the farm, and the objective calls from the Leviathans here in game number 1 that ultimately make the difference.
And at the long term, I'm not too worried about it, just because I think this, first off, it's best of 5. You got plenty of time to come back and work on stuff if you're the Scarabs. And I said, I put this on Twitter earlier, but the Scarabs are one of the best teams we've seen adapting game to game to game.
That's a good point.
And they have a little bit more wiggle room here, but there needs to be a lot of adaptation. A lot has to change because game 1, I mean, again, slow but inevitable burn. Every single small thing felt like it was just slightly in favor of the Leviathans.
Right.
And like you said, it was never enough that they were so far ahead that the game was over, but it was enough that there was never really a true opportunity for the Scarabs to showcase what they could do.
It's very Scarabs-esque, isn't it? You lose game 1 and then you make a great showing in what feels like game 2 a little bit later on. So we'll see. Solar Scarabs, it's bounce back time. Leviathans take game 1. Be right into game 2 after this.
To the SMITE Pro League, powered by Alienware, and talk about a Game 1. Certainly a pretty impressive display there, Mifflin, but before we get into the breakdown of Game number 1, just want to give you guys a quick shout out at home watching that there's a really limited edition Inside Apparel premium mousepad that is only going to be available during this playoffs weekend. So don't hesitate. If you want to go ahead and play God, make sure that you pick up this mousepad throughout the duration of the playoffs weekend. Otherwise, you're just going to be missing your chance forever. It's gone. That's it. It's here for now, gone later on. So make sure if you want it, go ahead and grab it. But talking about grabbing things, Leviathans certainly taking control of this set so far, Mifflin, as they rack in Game number 1 for their victory.
I mean, Inbound covered it in his interview. He said, dual lane aggression. That's the name of the game here this weekend. And that's exactly what happened. Dual lane aggression, but favoring the Leviathans. And the Scarabs were unwilling to shift their strategy. They kept taking fights around Yarkor. Mans was huge. Like 3 kills in 5-ish minutes. I probably wouldn't want to fight around this guy too much anymore. But the Scarabs just kept going over there, kept walking into the fire, essentially. And this is exactly what happens. Clean win from the Leviathans. But keep in mind, Taco, we are on the winning path for the Scarabs. They never, ever win Game 1 in a set. So I'm sure they're not too pressed.
Scarabs are 100% staying on brand to their Pro League standings and just set gameplay in general, dropping Game number 1 here. And it's got to be a little unsettling as well for the Leviathans, because if the Leviathans have been doing their homework at all, Mifflin, certainly they're aware of the fact that this is a pretty expected aggressive draft, I think, from the Scarabs. And I did like seeing the response from the Leviathans throwing Rungyu onto the Horace, but do you have any concerns as this set goes on? Because Scarabs, for me, are a team that aren't really scared of trying anything new. I can't necessarily say the same for the Leviathans.
Yeah, it feels like the Leviathans come into every single week with maybe 1 or 2 drafts that they really want to run, and they'll substitute like 1 pick if they have to, if it gets banned out. But generally, as far as team fight planning goes or set planning, it's one identity, one strategy that they bring in. And in a best-of-5 set, especially as you already highlighted, the Scarabs very adaptable. They should be able to figure out what the strategy is and kind of work around it going forward. But that said, the strategy's working. If the Leviathans can keep this pace, if they can keep finding that early aggression, it's super hard to slow down.
Well, heading into the picks and bans for game number 2, Mifflin, actually, according to that game 1 post standings, I found it interesting that the Gilgamesh was actually top of the player damage charts, despite the fact that it never really felt like SOT was really having any prime opportunities to actually get that huge initiation that we've been expecting from Gilgamesh. And again, picks and bans for game number 2, almost certain that there's going to be a lot of priority focus around the Kakolans, around the Gilgameshes here. And we did see that Raijin prioritization from the Leviathans, with Solar Scarabs now being in the pilot seat for pick 1. Do you expect that to change?
I don't think that the Scarabs are going to try and take away the Raijin. Baronic's certainly capable of playing that god, but the performance we just saw on the Raw, Mans was not missing. Searing Pain was always finding its target. I mean, Ragnarok gets beads out, didn't matter. He would find it consistently every single time. And when Baronic is able to play at this level on this pick, I think Raw really does fit the strategy that the Scarabs are going for. Even 24-ish minutes into the last game, we said, all right, if the Scarabs can just hold out a little bit longer, they can utilize the sustain in their draft, they might be able to come back. Unfortunately for the Scarabs, that's not how it panned out. The Leviathans win a very clean fight around that Fire Giant. But I don't think it comes down to compositions. The Solar Scarabs had a draft that can work. It's just cleaning up that early game.
My favorite part about our backroom discussion, though, was around that 23-minute mark when you made the call. This game's either ending in 4 minutes or we're going to see it stretch to 50. And Solar Scarabs being a team with that level of mental resilience, it's certainly going to take a toll at some point if they're able to actually leverage some of that early game prioritization that they keep trying to focus in these compositions. conditions against the Leviathans, but I want to go a little bit more in depth here, Mifflin, on the support gameplay that we saw coming out of Rongyu, specifically on that Horace. It did seem very problematic for inbound, especially since he didn't opt for those beads like we were anticipating.
No beads in the early game, get CC'd, you die. That's just the strategy. I have to imagine that inbound, if he is playing against a similar duo lane, like if the Leviathans bring Horace again, or if they have a Chiron in the early, probably going to pick up beads this time around, or at least something like a heavenly agility so you can get out of there a little bit more quickly. But instead, it was the blink. He was planning on getting aggressive, and that makes sense on the Cirquet pick. But up against the draft that the Leviathans had in game 1, you have to understand that early game likely going to be favoring them, at least in the duo.
I just love the way that Rongyu was able to create so much space with that Horace pick. It felt like Hardcore and Benitham didn't really have to do a whole lot other than kind of hit their abilities for the freebie follow-up that the Horace was able to provide. But Solar Scarabs choosing to stay on core for what they opted for in game number 1. Granted, they had second pick then, so Gilgamesh was just one of their 2 picks, but the focus onto this Gilgamesh pick, Mifflin, do you expect it to be for solo or troll again, or do you think this could be a little bit more of a flex option?
It is great as a flex option. It could go into the jungle. We know Layers is capable of playing that god. It could go back into solo, and as you already highlighted, SOT has a great performance on it in game 1, so I wouldn't feel too bad getting him back on this pick. But for now, it is just operating as that flex pick. It doesn't really have to go one way or the other, so the Leviathans are going to have to respect that going forward. I imagine we see the Solar Scarabs try and prioritize support in this 3rd slot, and that'll give us a little bit more clarity on where they go. Fenrir locked in. Well, I haven't learned anything. It could go into the jungle. It still could go into support. The Solar Scarabs still being very ambiguous with their draft.
I am leaning a little bit more towards this Fenrir being intended for Layers again, though, specifically because of the case that Brutalize can be a huge harassment factor against the Raijin and against the Chiron. But that Horace focus from the Leviathans, smart pickup here because almost certain it would have been banned in the 4th and 5th phase.
And it just works out so well with the buffs to Horace. Now his stuns got a little bit more range. We know Rongyu's capable of playing this pick, and with the adjustment from the Scarabs going towards this Heimdall, has to stand still if he wants to ride the Bifrost. Very easy for the Horace to kind of displace him a little bit, slow down that teleport with a knockup. So I like the draft so far from the Leviathans, and it makes sense that I like it because it's the exact same.
Heimdall is also just a little bit more of a comfort pick, it feels like, for Zatman. It's something that he has traditionally leaned into all throughout this split 1 phase, and not really a surprise to see him back on it for the playoffs here. And shaping up the rest of their composition, Scarabs did take note of what Benitham was able to restrict in that game 1. He didn't necessarily have to find the Gravity Surge or the Feather Steps every single time. It's really just about the threat of that Gravity Surge going off that can prevent so much objective control.
And then they move in with the Circuit ban as well. Panatom going to go a little bit deeper into the God Pool. Nemesis still out there and available, and has decent matchup into the Fenrir if he goes into the Ragnarok, strip away some of that defense he gets, and make it a little bit easier to finish off those kills. Tier locked in, that's Julio. That's Julio through and through. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, and it's going to have a ton of sustain, a lot of solo presence, and he means that once he has that sustain online around level 6, Tier becomes nigh unkillable. You can leave him alone on the islands, and that means that the Leviathans can keep the strategy going of game 1, that duo lane aggression.
Well, it seems as though Baranik's still very interested in maintaining that burst focus, and Scylla, very similar, I think, to Raw, except with a little bit more mobility behind her to be a little bit more complicated in order to actually pick off, and the Susano to pair with it. So, potentially Fenrir in the support role then for inbound. Gilgamesh still for SOT is my calling card. I'm looking at Leviathans, though. Daji still up for grabs, and Nemesis could potentially be a great shutdown asset as well against that front line that the Scarabs have opted for.
Man, you changed my mind. I was fully sold on the Nemesis lock-in, but now you've highlighted the Daji. It just fits the draft so well, and Panatom spots it out himself. Just so much beads burning potential now on the side of the Leviathans between the tier as well as just Chiron. You can force it with the slows. I mean, Horace has got great lockdown as well. It means that once that powwow comes online, should at least be able to find one target every single time. And well, the burn potential, if anyone gets pulled in, it's pretty strong.
On the bright side, though, for Inbound, Ragnarok, a slightly better form of CC immunity, so he can actually try and get away from all of that follow-up burst that's going to be coming through from the Leviathans, because Taiko drums into that dodgy Powwow is a devastating combo for any front line to try and deal with. And on that same note, however, I do like the Susanoo mobility aspect, because he's going to be great, I think, at harassing Shinto on this Raijin, so long as he doesn't get as controlled in the early games what we saw happening in Game 1.
And we saw Solar Scarabs struggling a little bit with AoE damage in Game 1. Well, so Susanoo should be able to make up for that weakness slightly with the Typhoon ultimate. Great AoE CC, nice burst as well, and he's a very adaptable pick. Can go in, drop someone down to about 10% HP, and then immediately disengage. I think that it's going to fit Layers' playstyle incredibly well. But as you already highlighted, if he gets shut down in the early, Susanoo has a very hard time making the comeback, especially against this Leviathans draft. If Daji ever pulls ahead, she's got a pretty good matchup there.
But as far as comebacks are concerned, I would say, Mifflin, Scylla is definitely one of your best bets in terms of just trying to have a little bit of contention on that objective gameplay, because Leviathans, they love controlling the team fights, they love funneling that into objectives right away, and I know for a fact Baronic's definitely got his eyes set on those prizes.
He does, and with the Leviathans draft, not great objective secure. I mean, Taiko drums might be the best high damage ability
it's
that they
just
have.
Risk versus reward, right?
Yeah, risk-reward situation, like all decisions in life. You really can't say anything isn't risk-reward. That's a great Finchism right there. I used to say that all the time.
Well, we'll get to see what happens here in game number 2, Mifflin, because Solar Scarabs, Leviathans, Leviathan still looking to make their mark. Dulcin, Gore, you guys know what to do.
It is a best-of-5 set.
Dave, I don't
this
know
one
what to
almost
do.
feels like, wait.
I don't know what to do.
What do I do with my hands? I don't know. Can we talk? All right, so now you and I can actually talk. This is not going to hit the mark, I don't think, for anyone at home, which is probably why it's not worth saying. I don't know what Hindu Man was doing just now behind camera.
Oh, yeah, like he just kind of came in and was just like,
He stared at us and then
watching us.
walked out with a mannequin without a head. I don't know. Did you see that? That was
oh, yeah,
so
the
weird.
mannequin's gone.
Yeah, the mannequin's gone. Yeah, so behind the scenes while
gotta
Picks
be
and
a merch
Bands is
thing.
happening, we're all trying to focus, and then Hindu Man's walking around. I'm sure he's setting up a bit or a video or something later on, but never been more confused in my entire
Or
life
worse,
than in that.
a message.
A message in blood. Atlantis Leviathans, though, they win game number 1. Look, and I was, before we lost all control and didn't know what to do after Taco told us we did, my mindset here is, look, it's best of 5. Leviathans, you got to get to 3 wins, so even if the Scarabs lose this one, they have comeback potential.
Yes.
But it's the immediate bounce back that I think has serviced the Scarabs so well in their sets. If they go down 0-2 to the Leviathans, I don't know, man. It might just all be over in 3 if the Solar Scarabs aren't able to at least have a good showing here in Game 2.
That'll be the moment where Zapman has to, like, bring the world's passive back, kind of collaborate, get everybody there going, although depending on who you ask, it's arguable that a lot of people give credit to the Neil passive more than anything. You have to see if the Scarabs can inherit at least a little bit. If every piece of that team gets a little bit of it.
Whoa, Layers with an engage early on here, but as he overcommitted, Panatom blinks back in. First blood ticking away, and Layers goes down. Thought that he had found first blood, but instead he's in the dirt. Minute and 20 seconds in.
And they're still low to the point where Baronic feels confident, but this is one of those moments. I don't know how long you want to sit over there if you're Scylla. One good Thunder Crash, and at least forces your beads, but I think there's going to be a lot of follow-up damage.
The tick damage on the back end, you just need a little bit more, and Panatom just walks down the mid lane and picks up a quick 2 kills. That is a brutal way for this game to start. There's a moment where Layers maybe thinks that there's enough damage there with the Scylla in the mid lane to find an opening kill. But instead now, Panatom on this Daji off to a 2-0 start. Shinto has a couple of assists in the back pocket as well. It's a brilliant start for the Leviathans.
I mean, that is one of those moments where, yes, the Daji bleed gets the kill, but that last banana being thrown out by Shinto really does help secure it. Again, that little bit of damage goes a long way, and so far for the Leviathans, that's, like you said, maybe the best start that you could possibly have gotten. Panatom with 2 kills on his belt, being able to find a little bit of pressure, but 2 assists going to the mid laner. You can see the level discrepancy starting to form between Shinto and Baronic. That being said, there's a lot more going for the Scarabs late game. I want to watch as SOT this Susanoo solo. I want to just see how that goes throughout the game, but it's this duo lane. Zapman was heavily banned out in game 1, finally gets his Heimdall, He's got a pretty good track record on this Heimdall for his success.
Yep.
So it'd be nice to see how he's able to keep it. I think it's something like 67, around 2/3 of the time for just him on Heimdall, and that's including last year. This year, I think it's been a little better for him. So we'll have to see if he can kind of maintain that going their way. Because like you said, this is a very important one. If the Scarabs go down 0-2, well, that starts to get a little more nerve-wracking, right? Like one game dropped, maybe that's the pressure they need in order to perform, but also that does mean that things are going to end up falling down very heavily for them if they make even a single mistake. This is the time to start to shine and really kind of knock it back if you want to go 4 or 5.
Ability to scale into this game for sure for the Solar Scarabs, but we know what a late game Raijin can do as well as the Chiron. Watching that little engage just now, Yarkor chasing down Zapman, I'm convinced that Chiron's just annoying. And I mean that like in a good way, right? Like that's what Chiron is meant to do. But Zapman trying to walk away, you get the damage down on the ground, you're able to find some follow-up damage on the back end. No surprise after little moments like that. Why this god has started to see more pick rate. Panatom now just walks on into Baronic, eats the entire crush and is not worried about it. Up into the Pal-Out. It's the freest solo kill of Panatom's life. Baronic now 0-2, and Panatom avoids the drop kick with a blink.
What a timing. I mean, that is narrow to be able to get that from the land just before Layers gets that off. I mean, you had to see the calculation there for Panatom to get out of there. I was kind of curious if he was going to be able to get out alive, but ultimately keeping himself going. And now Yarkor even taking on a 1v2. With Wrong Yu, they're coming over.
Oh, Wrong Yu wants to rotate on in. Here comes the Horace. Can Yarkor buy enough time? The answer is yes. Zetman has to use the beads, and the crystal will not be enough. And the Leviathans have filled up the gas tank with high-octane fuel here in game number 2. They're off to a 4-0 start, already 2K in the lead.
I mean, 3 kills on the Panatom. Look, if you're Daji, you're having a hell of a game.
Oh my God.
This is probably the best case scenario for you starting things off early on. And I will say, we have seen games that have continued at exactly this pace in the past for the Scarabs. I mean, what was it, even last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, they just got thrashed in a game number 1, and then it was like, okay, you know what? That wasn't great. They came out on Twitter and they were like, that was not good. Let's go to game 2. Let's just pretend it didn't happen. This kind of feels, at least as of right now, like it might be one of those. They had to turn everything around.
Wow.
I mean, that's just such a good read, being able to get the Pal-Out off right then. I didn't expect him to go in on the Baronic that heavily. But it's that narrow.
God.
It's that moment. If Layers goes for an auto, probably dead there for Panatom. But he goes for the drop kick, which admittedly is better secure, better CC, better lockdown. But that blink comes back to bite him.
It was the only time where that could have happened, right?
Yes, there's so many other scenarios where that never happens.
It was a millisecond that Panatom had of a window there to get that blink off. He's able to do so. Leviathan's jungler certainly has showed up here today. It was a quiet start to game 1, but this Daji pick is really up the ante, you feel like now. A 3 versus 2 over on the left-hand side, and if the Solar Scarabs finally struck pay dirt, they have, as Yarkor goes down first. Wrong Yu will limp away. Zapman has overstayed, and the Taiko drums will secure the return kill, and then the taunt back in onto Layers as Wrong Yu finds the stun and the tick damage on the back end, looking for the second kill of this fight, and Shinto's got the double.
Now that looks like one of those, oh man, if only he was able to get out. Panatom was lurking in the jungle. He was ready to come up and try to catch that path cut through the duo lane.
Ugh.
I mean, they were looking for it. I will say, though, really good for Zapman to get a kill. Any sort of clapback is going to be solid. Granted, would have been nice had it gone on to someone like Panatom, but Yarkor, look, I'm not going to complain about killing anybody on the Leviathans. They're up 6-1 right now. And it's not really that out of control. Like, it's one of those things, early game kills, if it continues at this pace, that's when it gets really problematic.
Right.
That's when it becomes troublesome. And it's not happy-go-lucky right now.
Panatom up into the ultimate will keep him alive. As a lot of the CC flies on through, Layers gets pulled back in. It's a double pull from Panatom, the jungler running wild. In game number 2, a crush on the back end maybe keeps Inbound alive, but who am I kidding? Panatom's there for the 4th kill of the game. No red buff is safe. No side of the map feels like it'll be safe here in game 2. We are 7 minutes in.
Yeah.
And Panatom is 4-0-2. Now that level discrepancy is going to start to build as Layers is down for a couple more seconds. Just 1 level at the moment, but could get worse before it gets better.
And they're not giving you a chance to breathe here. Zapman's now going to be the one that's in a little bit of trouble, and they're committing ults to it. Doesn't look like they're actually committing to this kill, though, which is interesting to see from the Leviathans after what's been so kill-heavy from them entirely. Backing off there. Maybe they just have too much gold to spend. But I will go back to the point I was making, which is that it's still not the end of the world. This is not great for the Scarabs, I won't lie. There's no way to sugarcoat that.
Their Titan is still on the map.
And their towers are still doing well.
Right.
They're still healthy.
The game isn't over.
There's no Gold Furies, no Pyromancers taken, or even available at this point. They are down 3-ish thousand gold, yeah. And that is where things become the most problematic, is just that lead. But it's not something you can't fight back from, and I think that's kind of where I'm looking at it. This is not the ideal start, but it is not the end of the world either. In fact, we've seen them fight back from deficits like this. So it's one of those things that I want to, hold up the trophy. The Leviathans are playing this phenomenally, and if they can keep this up, yeah, in 10, 15 minutes, this game's done, and we're going to be sitting here thinking, man, that was kind of all them that game.
Right.
But I think the Scarabs, especially after that last not last skirmish, the skirmish prior to that, where they're able to pick up a kill on the Yarkor, they show a lot of promise, and I want to see the fight back. It's just going to take a little bit of time.
Yeah, I'm intrigued at what SOT is going to be able to do here on the Susano. I know that's something you brought up earlier on,
Yeah.
and only time will tell. Soul Eater had been a pretty popular item when Sun Wukong was one of the more popular picks there out of the solo lane. Inbound blinked on, though, and Taiko Drums will secure the kill there. Now Shinto has 4 kills on the board as well. It's a stun and an ultimate from Zapman on a Panatom, but Wrong You is here to peel out the rest of this fight. And I'm a Monster with an auto attack from Zapman is able to return a kill and get Panatom down for the first time this game, but it is immediately traded out as Wrong You will pick up his first.
I mean, I think getting a kill onto Panatom is absolutely worthwhile for you. A good amount of burst.
Get this Heimdall going.
It's getting something on board. I actually almost wish it went to Baronic. I think the Scylla is going to be able to do a little more. Then again, like I said earlier, Zapman's had a good track record on Heimdall. As long as he had it, things tend to work out well for the Scarabs. So we'll see if he's able to hold true to that. So far, the answer hasn't necessarily been yes. He's got the only 2 kills on his team. Thumbs up. It's 2 kills to 10. Thumbs down. There's some good things, some bad things that always come forward with it. But I think the biggest part is that they're still having a fight. And that's one of the other things I want to give to the Scarabs is that, I mean, they're never down and out mentally.
No.
Even if it's what feels like a very mounting lead coming up for them, almost 4,000
Oh, it is.
gold.
I don't
Still
think
a
it
little
even
bit under.
feels that way, and it is that way.
And that's, I mean, Dave, this is pre-Gold Furies, pre-Pyromancers. Like, I'm a little worried now.
Right, it's the next 5 minutes, right?
But, again, Baronic has better secure. That's the term I'm looking for there on some of those objectives. These next 5 minutes are the determining pace. If the Scarabs can pull it back, get some objectives, get some kills, then we're back at a wash. If it continues going the way the first 10 minutes did, then I'm just going to start talking about how great the Leviathans are, because that's about all they're giving us.
SOT trying to make something happen in the mid lane, chases Shinto down with the Aegis. Perfect, but SOT from range finds the execute, but it's traded out as Panatom grabs the 5th of the game. Crush nearly grabs the kill here. Wrong You, maybe in on the re-engage, but it's Wrong You on his own. Julio's going to rotate in over from right here as well, so there's a stun onto Baronic, and then the knockback is there, and it is perfect, and that damage, massive from the Leviathan solo laner. And the Scarabs are able to find 1, but they lose 2.
I'm going to be honest, that was a lot more than I expected. I thought, okay, he's going to Fearless, he's going to go ahead and throw out the whole kit and caboodle, and it's not going to do too much. Like, you should still have a 3rd HP maybe, Baronic. No, he was decimated there. Good call from Julio to rotate in, and I guess good call to know how much damage he's going to do.
Man, Zapman with the ultimate over onto Wrong You, but you got a 5-1 and 4 Dashi chasing you down, and you're not going to survive that one, Zapman. Inbound is going to leap over the wall, so he'll survive. But now this is spread to effectively every part of the map except SOT, who is 1-1 and 0. Didn't get a chance to talk about it before the Soul Eater's there, and then I'm sure where he's going to go. Maybe a Transcendence after that. We'll have to wait and see. But damage is on the mind here for Solo or Troll.
And I'm excited, again, how he rotates in. We've seen Tsukiyomi. We've seen a lot of Assassins solo be prominent, especially against Warriors in the past, and being able to rotate into these late-game team fights and be very strong. And it comes usually at the cost of, well, we have a Warrior elsewhere in the draft. This time it's in the jungle. So maybe layers, granted 0-3-1, not necessarily the best early game that you could wish for, but something that you could expect a little bit earlier on, or later on, I should say, is Gilgamesh being Gilgamesh. So far, he's been having pretty good time. Didn't win a whole lot so far today and hasn't been winning these skirmishes so far, but I still think that he's going to be able to bring a lot of pressure towards that late game. It's how SOT slots into this, how Baronic can continue. I think Zap's been getting a lot of the kills, but I think a lot of it is Baronic's damage right now. That crush, the I'm a Monster, all going to be increasingly important as time goes on, especially because now there's Gold Furies on the table, eventually Pyromancers, Fire Giants. If Baronic is alive, Relics available, then he can be in the fight and potentially be something to thwart the Leviathans. Otherwise, we're looking at what is now a 6,000 gold lead, and will soon continue to go that way unless the Scarabs can right the boat.
Julio showing us yet again how much damage is there, knocked out of the Sikkim range. But now this tier is a big threat as well. We've talked plenty about Panatom and Shinto, and for good reason, but Rongyu has put together an incredible game as well. Now back-to-back games on this Horace have looked good, and now looking for the engage on a Zapman, who had to use the ultimate to disengage, has the beads in as well. Those will get used, but there's enough damage on the back end, of course, from the Leviathans to find the kill. Inbound will barely survive, but survive he does, so no more kills given over to the Leviathans. But Zapman has been chosen this game, as well as Layers and Baronic and Inbound. Now it's 2 and 5 on this Heimdall, and the left side of the map is effectively a wasteland now for the Solar Scarabs.
And there's been, I'm going to go ahead and throw this out there. I think there's been a lot of arguments, a lot of conversations, Scarabs versus Kings, things going into the future and stuff like that for this stage specifically. And I know I can already see Reddit threads that are going to be coming out in the future, depending on how this set goes, if it continues on this pace or not. But I will say, this feels a lot less like an underprepared Scarabs team and more like a Leviathans team that recognized exactly what's been going wrong for them. I mean, again, look at their last year, y'all. They do great in the typical regular season game, and then they don't even matter when it came to playoffs. This is a team that needs this.
I mean, I don't know if you laugh, you cry, something. Zapman immediately, probably both. Depends on what side you're on. If you're the Leviathans, you're chuckling. If you're the Scarabs, you're crying. Zapman died, walked back to lane, and then died again. Used the Aegis to extend his life just a little bit further, but Daji pretty good at gap closing. So 8-1-4 now as Panatom. 12 out of the 15 kills have been affected. 8 out of the 15 are in the back pocket of Panatom. Serrated Edge early on in this build as well, level 15. On that Daji, effectively can 1v1, you feel like anyone on the map. Then you start to look to the Scarabs, where you have to sow some intrigue in games like this, and you've done a great job of it, talking about different avenues that the Scarabs can get back into this game. One, stop dying to Panatom, but that's harder, or that's easier said than done, because effectively you can't be on the map if you're going to make good on that, and you can't walk around while Rognew's looking for the engage like he is, and Julio controlling the space that Inbound is able to play. Ragnarok used for the CC immunity, but the damage from Shinto is good on the backside, and now Inbound 0-3. Maybe SOT goes Soul Eater into Transcendent score. It's going to take a little while for that item to get stacked up. Maybe this is just a full-on bet. We're betting the house now for the Solar Scarabs on being able to survive somehow into this late game. Because 15 minutes in, this is anything but a close matchup.
And unless he's going to pull an SOT, Inbound starting up the pathway to Alono's Mask. Granted, I don't know how this item would work on equal footing, let alone down 9,000 gold, and so far 3 levels in support. And this is going to be an interesting one for him. Again, you're sacrificing the damage, which admittedly he's not necessarily going to be looking for anyway, for tankiness. All right, now I think the main goal, I mean, it's kind of, look, I just finished playing a lot of games.
Julio's
There's a
gonna
couple,
have length.
you get to some late games, depending on the game, the last mission will just be like survive.
Yeah, right.
That's what is in my mind. Like, that's the mission objective for the Scarabs. I can see the screen popping up for them, where right now your goal is to just live, if you can, as long as possible. You're not out of it. I still think until that Fire Giant goes down, until you have a Phoenix fall, you are not out of this game, but 9,000 gold is definitely not an easy a hill to climb. I mean, this is just going to be very difficult for you. In fact, it's way harder than I'm even giving it credit for. Even fighting at a Fire Giant is going to be damn near impossible.
Julio's about to get a taste of a 3v1 over here on the right-hand side. Crush goes down. Beads get used as Julio dodging out what feels like everything, and he is going to get out, and he's going to survive as the Solar Scarabs go fishing. And they come up empty-handed. Araiju over onto SOT, and the Taiko drums are there as well. You're kidding me. Baronic dies on the end of it. Solo or Troll will die as well. You're betting the house once again. Unfortunately, you come up empty-handed if you're the Solar Scarabs. Julio makes a big play, and the Leviathans as the team collapse and start up the FG.
I mean, this should be a great start for them to try and finish the game. They already have minions over there pushing on the right tier 2. Left tier 2's gone. Mid tier 2 is not going to be feeling the same pressure as the other two, but as long as Daji, specifically where Panatom is, you can kind of see the path they're looking to take just in where the aggression is. Phoenix is exposed. Scarabs might just be looking to try and make the same play they did last time, which is see if they can get something while the Leviathans are pushing forward. Unfortunately for them, 1, they're not pushing that tier 2, and 2, Leviathan's back this time around, so you're not going to have the same window, at least not this time.
Normally you can draw a thread to some hope for an opposing team of like everyone on the Leviathans at this point had reached level 20, they were full build. We talk about how it's reached a point where every aspect of the game is now just the Scarabs catching up instead of chasing. That's not the case right now. The Leviathans are still growing that XP and gold lead because 5th item slot open for effectively everyone here. So, yeah, the Solar Scarabs are chasing the Leviathans, but the Leviathans are able to continue expanding on that gap, at least for another couple levels and a couple items. Panatom's built into the Titan's Bane as well. My God, the amount of damage that this Daji's about to do. If I'm Panatom, if I didn't get hit by that Sikkim, I'm diving Baronic, I think, every day of the week. Baronic has to use the beads here. So the Still is able to survive Gore, but 5 members with FG walk down the mid lane here, and maybe this is the best the Scarabs can do, is trying to peel out some gold elsewhere on the map, but the Phoenix is going to get sieged here. Nobody from the Scarabs channeling their back. So this one will go quietly.
I mean, that's maybe one of the freest Phoenixes I think we've gotten to see. I mean, they did something
right
similar
call?
in game number 1. And, I mean, like, get the tier 1 on right. Like, I mean, you're technically getting some map state favors in your side, but
you just lose the fight right under your own Phoenix there if you're the Scarab. Like, if you show up there, you definitely just lose the fight and then probably the game, right? Like, by not showing up,
you don't lose.
You don't lose?
Technically, yes. Like, I mean, it's one of those things, again, I think I said this in game 1, where there's maybe some more question marks around it, which is just the fact that, man, why are you not backing? Why are you not defending this? And it's just because they have a worse chance of survival of winning this game if they're actually there to save the Phoenix than they do if they just hang out around all the other towers.
Well, if you come for the king, you best come correct, and Panatom is the king here in game number 2, and a Ragnarok from inbound only buys death on the back end. That's a long death timer, 35 seconds, mid-Phoenix is down. And so the Leviathans, you don't want to say playing with their food, but at this point they can effectively push in any side of the map and get the objective pretty cleanly. I think left side is probably the next best option.
Yeah,
Oh no, I wonder where the crystal was going to go. It's right into harm's way. Some good peel from SOT will keep Zapman in the fight just a little bit longer, but the Leviathans maybe feel like if they can get this kill after the cooldowns are there, a rampage from Panatom, 9-1 and 6, might be able to end the game. That's a 50-second death timer on Zapman.
I mean, they still have over a minute on this Fire Giant, and look at how well Julio's zoning here. It just feels like it's going in their favor. And I've been looking at Rung Yu. I mean, the healing that Horace brings is nothing to scoff at. Definitely something that he's been able to highlight here. And there's not a lot of anti-heal, if any anti-heal on the other side. None that I caught prior. So they're definitely getting the full brunt of the heal.
Man, game 2 has just been absolutely brutal for the Solar Scarabs. The Atlantis Leviathans from minute 1 came to play, and it's Panatom and Shinto spearheading things. Wrong you, reeling in the fish time and time again. The Atlantis Leviathans in 21 minutes, maybe 22, by the time these last few kills come through. Or they're going to take game number 2 in a commanding lead here in this best-of-5 set.
Yeah, I mean, let alone just going up 2-0. Let's say they're 2 incredibly close games that go up 2-0, but the first game...
That's got to be mental...
Yeah, like the game 1, you go back to it, it's what? You feel like you're still in it if you're the Scarabs. I think like you fight back, you have some really decent moments, but ultimately it does still come out to be the Leviathans. Game 2 is, like, that's going to knock you down a peg. I mean, now you're down 2-0, and, I mean, that was a thrashing. There's no way around that one. It was like 21-3 or something like that. They just controlled that game from the get-go. The Scarabs, unless it is going to be just the full reverse sweep territory, they've got a lot of work to do here for Game 3 to make sure that it doesn't go that way.
That'd be a lot of fun if it were to happen, but it's all going to start with one game. In game number 3, it's time for the Scarabs to bounce back. Can they do it? Stick around and find out.
Hello and welcome back to the SMITE Pro League, powered by Alienware. And as you guys can tell, these games so far from the Leviathans, they have certainly been gaming, and a big credibility to that goes to our sponsor, Alienware. So make sure to go ahead, check out smitegame.com/Alienware, plug that code SMITEAW. Thank you, Mifflin. I do appreciate the moral support here. And you too could be gaming like the Leviathans if you plug in that SMITE AW for the Alienware, and just let them know that we care, because we really do care, because they provide us some primo product. But it's not just about the product, Mifflin, it's about the gameplay itself, and so far it has been nothing but clean from the Leviathans.
I mean, 18 kills in 18 minutes. That's all you really have to say for the Leviathans going forward. I'm not sure we're still on that Solar Scarab signature winning path. I got a chance to talk to Aggro after Game 1. We had a little bit of an argument. Go figure, we argue all the time. I said Game 1's the most important. He said Game 2 is, because going down 2-0 in a 3-game set, that is so hard to recover from mentally. From here on out, if you are a Scarabs fan, you have to demand perfection. That's hard to do.
And that certainly has been far away from what we have seen out of the Scarabs so far, unfortunately. A lot of questionable decision-making, I would say, from the Scarabs, and great punishments, though, from the Leviathans. They have been just picking up every single time the ball is dropped by Scarabs.
Yeah, in particular from Game 2, I want to go all the way back to P's and B's. I'm so surprised that SOT wanted the Susano inside of Soul Lane. It's a pretty bad matchup into the tier. You can never use the third ability aggressively, or you just get fearless. You can't match the sustain. And had Susano gone into the jungle, well, it's great at shutting down Raijins. I mean, it just didn't make a lot of sense to me that they prefer to have Gilgamesh there.
It does kind of funnel into the whole premise, though, that Scarabs are a team that's not scared of flexing anything, anywhere, and this is just a little bit on course for them. Layers trying out the Gilgamesh in the jungle to see if he could have a little bit more pressure, a little bit more harassment into Shinto on that mid lane, and even the sparks that we saw from the Scarabs that they were trying to make happen in the dual lane just never really came to fruition. There was just so much investment for a single pick from the Scarabs, and they just had nothing left in the tank from the Leviathans to look for the counter collapse.
And the Scarabs back into Game 3, backs against the wall. Seems like ban's going to roll out largely the same. Wouldn't be surprised if we see the Amir ban come through here as well. But I would not be remiss if the Scarabs go ahead and try and take away that Raijin. Shinto has been so important to his team through early aggression, jumping aggressively, surviving ganks. This Raijin pick has been such a thorn in their side. I think the Scarabs got to throw some respect its way.
Would like to see a little bit of a shift towards that mid lane disparity that we've been kind of noticing. I don't hate Baronic on the Raw or the Scylla by any means, but it's just like you said, Mifflin. This Raijin just seems to be a continuous problem for the Scarabs, and it's not really one that the Scylla or the Raws are able to respond to all that well, but I'm also keeping in mind what Benitham is doing in the jungle, because that Daji had some flavor behind it, and he just did not let Zatman exist.
Yeah, every time Panatom walked in, be it 1 versus 3, 1 versus 4, he'd just go up into the powwow, wait for his team to regroup, and then pull 1 or 2 targets in and immediately turn around these engagements. The Solar Scarabs were continuously baited into taking fights that they really didn't have any right taking, even if it was inside their own red buff or at their own purple camp. It just felt like every single step of the way, Panatom was ahead of Layers.
And one thing's for sure here, Mifflin, the Scarabs just cannot afford to let this Game 3 get away from them early on. I know that we've seen it time and time again from the Scarabs when their backs have been up against the wall, that they actually perform to that standard that they try to hold themselves to, and even to the standard that I think other teams in the league have given them respect for. The Raijin change here now for Baronic is definitely a direct call out to Shinto. Let's see what else you got.
Yeah, and as well as the Horace ban coming through means that Rongyu is going to have to go a little bit deeper into his god pool as well. But that does leave the Leviathans up and available to strip away one of the Solar Scarabs. Pick Gilgamesh. Going to go to them for the first time this set. And I think we can get a little bit more predictable with it here. They're not really the team that's going to experiment too much.
Well,
I think they could go solo, could go jungle. I do not imagine Rongyu takes it.
I would actually be more keen to expect Gilgamesh for Rongyu as opposed... I think it's open-ended still, but for me, it's more about Rongyu and Benitham here for who wants to try and switch off on it. And the Gilgamesh, though, could be a nice choice for Julio, especially knowing that it's going to be Kokolin, a little bit more conventional from the Solar Scarabs as far as the picks and bans in this top 3 have been.
But I am concerned for this Danzaburou pick. In a set where they've fallen behind pretty consistently throughout the early, Danzaburou really does struggle from behind. Doesn't have the greatest escape mechanic. Sure, you can hop on a rocket for CC immunity. Super easy to block that, though. You can stop it every single time. And the leaves, well, hit him up a little bit with the Chiron. The second he goes in that leaf stance, hit him with the second ability. He's out of it, he's slowed, and he's so easy to lock down.
The thing about the Danzaburou for me here, Mifflin, is that Danzaburou is definitely a hunter that prefers looking for that 1v1 matchup, but against a team like the Leviathans, you have to assume there's never going to be a 1v1 opportunity up against Hardcore. Drangyu loves catering to that dual lane. The Leviathans love catering and pressuring the dual lane, and then they'll slowly transition, and it's almost like that trickle-down effect even. If they get control over duo, they are sure to just start taking over the jungle. And so the one thing I do like about the Danzaburou here is more so for team initiation. I think that it can be a solid asset for just opening up a fight outright.
But is Zatman really going to be willing to trade out his life to engage these fights for his team?
Well, I think firing it off.
Just fire it off from a range.
Yes.
You can do that, of course. But it is a little bit harder to aim that way. I really do like this pickup, though, and this is going to be the biggest adaptation for me, is this Hercules lock-in. I am imagining it goes into that support role. Inbound was signature on this pick. One of the first guys to really run the Hercules back in Season 7. Had a lot of success on this pick. Can get aggressive very easily in the early. Wouldn't even be overly surprised if we see him go for something like a Bluestone to give him a little bit more of an edge in the early game as well. But the Solar Scarab strategy has remained largely the same. It is still aggression through and through for the early game.
Fafnir, it would actually be a really interesting pickup choice here for the Leviathans. He is a Guardian, I think, that we saw a lot of play during the group stages, a lot of focus, especially in the picks and bans. But Cerberus, a little bit more catered, I think, towards the AoE presence that Leviathans have clearly opted for, especially having that Merlin on lock. We haven't seen huge burst coming out of these Leviathans drafts, but who needs burst when you have so much control anyway?
So much burn potential as well. Merlin going to be shredding these objectives. Cerberus has a sneaky good matchup in a Hercules, able to get some of that lifesteal, or healing rather, for himself. Through and through, Leviathans come away with a pretty strong draft here. It's CC-centric. Tyr is going to be burning beads. Stygian Torment going to be doing largely the same, and just all to set up for that huge stun from Gilgamesh on a single target to set up for Merlin, or even the slows to chase out. The Solar Scarabs, I think, really do need to win the early game if they want to beat this draft from the Leviathans.
And do you think that it's a little problematic here for the Leviathans that they have been able to accomplish so much control in these games 1 and 2? Because if there's one thing that has also unfortunately been somewhat consistent with the Leviathans in past years even, it's when it matters most, they tend to fall just a little short. So it would be great to see them have that adaptability over their time in the Pro League especially, and actually make it through.
It could come to that. I'm not really willing to bet against the Leviathans when they're up 2 games here. Legitimately, the Solar Scarabs have to win 3 games straight. So hard to do. Even if the Solar Scarabs win this game, Leviathans have such a nice safety net going forward that I don't think it shakes their mental too much. They shouldn't have to put too much weight to their throw curse, if you would.
I think the mental and where I feel as though it might be a little bit more questionable from the Leviathans isn't for what they're playing into from the Scarabs. I think it's more so just about the team independently and individually speaking, because these are players who have all come so close every single time. They're right there on the cusp. And do you think that this could finally be a playoffs where we see the Leviathans run it all the way through?
I think it could be if they are able to maintain the level of play that we saw in both Game 1 and 2. I mean, I don't want to play against that. I don't think any team in the league really wants to play against that dominance that we've seen so far. The Leviathans have been looking very good. They've come out to play this week, and they've proven it so far in this set. If they take a 3-0 here, I think that they could be even one of the favorites to just win out the playoffs.
Well, what about that jungle matchup specifically? Because I think it is a little bit more obvious now that we're seeing the Gilgamesh right into the Ratatoskr. Who do you think is the better edge here?
Ratatoskr is going to have definite edge when it comes to early ganks. Just that global presence going to be so good. It's up to him to set the pace, and Gilgamesh just has to try and match up.
Well, it's up to the Leviathans to see if they can close it out and see if they'll be facing the Olympus Bolts next up here. Dolson, Gore, you guys might not know what to do last time, but how about for Game 3?
We definitely know what to do now. We've somewhat figured it out, at least in the sense that we know to speak into our microphones and say words, but...
This is called a microphone?
Actually, it's a headset, technically, if you really think of it that way. But there's a microphone attached to the headset. Now, Gore, one big pivot I like. Look, the turnaround has to start now.
Yes.
There has to be 3 straight games for the Solar Scarabs, and it has to look absolutely nothing like game number 2 did. I like the pivot to the Hercules here for Inbound, because in the last couple of times we've seen this pick, I've liked how Inbound has looked. Even in a loss, I think Inbound has the ability on this pick to take over some games. So I think a good chance for the Solar Scarabs duo lane to survive here in game number 3.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch what this one can do. I think Layers is on a much more early game proactive pick in this Ratatosker, and that's what I'm going to say I want to see out of him as well. I mean, granted, the last time we said, hey, the Scarabs need to win in the early game here, didn't quite go the way they would have liked, and so maybe they're going to be looking for some of that late game pressure. But I think Layers is going to be able to be a little more hands-on this time around. Same thing for Inbound. Early on in this lane, Cerberus and Chiron have some fight, but there seems to be more in mid.
Oh no, this is what happened in game number 2, but this time the Solar Scarabs have found first blood, and Layers and Baronic just walk on in and grab a kill on a Panatom, and that is a perfect start here, because look at what happened in game 2, Gore. The Leviathans were able to get that early kill on the Panatom, and then it just snowballed out of control from that point on. Now Layers has first blood, a little extra gold in the back pocket, and on a pick in this Ratatosker that come level 5 can make big impacts all over the map. Great start for the Scarabs in game 3.
Yeah, I mean, and just again, like you said, specifically Layers getting the kill, that is crucial for them to be able to find success, or at least feel comfortable. No blink for Panatom as well, so the aggression that's going to be existent, well, that could have been existent in mid, is not going to exist too much. And I think that slows down Shinto and Panatom a lot. Gives the Scarabs a lot of wiggle room to work with, too. Already, they've been able to get some of the neutral objectives. I think the Oracle Harpies that we just saw there go for Layers. Mid-camps being able to go their way. But now they can split up their experience, do exactly what they need to early on to find themselves a small cushion. Granted, it's half a level maybe there in the jungle. That's going to be massive early on. I mean, that's when you tick to level 5 slightly before Panatom. You're able to get aggressive on the mid, have a semi-global ult ready for you to jump in anywhere. That's going to feel solid if Layers can keep up this trajectory. And that's only one kill.
Inbound and Wrong You dueling it out a little bit here. You think Inbound's probably got a little bit more damage at this point in the game. And that can maybe open up the door to some of this score. Red buff respawning soon. Purple buff is going to be up on this side of the map. This is something we haven't seen the Scarabs really do throughout the set. They haven't had the ability. But now a chance for the Scarabs to find some jungle invades. It's all been Leviathans in the invade department. But now the Solar Scarabs with a little extra pressure in mid. They have this Hercules on their side who now has a red buff. Can strip away some of the jungle on the Leviathan side of the map.
I like that even more. One good knock up, one stun. I mean, yeah, this is what you do when you have a Hercules with a red.
They did it! They did it! Inbound and Layers combined for the body block onto Wrong You, and now Yarkor left alone. He'll be able to dash away, and good thing for it.
That is what that buff was for, by the way. Like, that is that single line of text, what, 4 weeks ago now?
Yep.
That's what that's for, that knock-up immunity.
Inbound, though, sticks around on the left-hand side, finds the driving strike onto Yarkor.
Good damage.
But he'll survive. Yeah, red buff tends to help already difficult early game matchup feel a little bit worse now for the Leviathans. It's a great proactive start. You've got to be feeling good with the Scarabs in the way that this game has started off at least. Now you've stolen a red buff. You looked at a purple buff invade there as well. You're keeping Yarkor down. You're keeping Wrong You down, who's been white hot so far this set as well. This is the best start so far for the Scarabs here in Game 3.
Look, we had one semi-game and one non-game from the Scarabs, so this is a really, really brilliant turnaround, and I'm really happy to be able to see that they're not only giving a fight, but I mean, it seems like the Leviathans aren't sure how to handle it. I mean, that was Wrong You in his jungle about as far back as you could get and still theoretically be safe and still locked up against the wall. If you're going to make plays like that, it definitely showcases where your mind is, and I think this is a good spot for the Scarabs. As much as it is also the worst spot for the Scarabs, right? I mean, you're, up 2-0. You've got a really good early lead, over 1,000 gold already, about 4 minutes in. But you have to do this game and the next game and the game after. This is a good start. I'm just excited to see if they can hold on to it, because the Leviathans, sometimes it's not the early game you're worried about. In fact, most of the time, it's not the early game you're worried about against this team. You're worried about the transition into that mid to late. So they have to keep this pressure going for a long time.
Inbound, grabs the knockback, and he's got the push on the Wrong You as well. And that is one dead Cerberus as Baronic notches his first of the game, 101. Now 1 level lead over Shinto as well. Luckily for the Leviathans, Panatom was doing the red buff that entire time, so no invade this time from the Solar Scarabs. But this is that proactivity that I talked about with this Hercules. When Inbound is on this pick and Layers is able to combine with it, it gives the Scarabs a bit of a foothold here 5 minutes in.
I mean, this is one of those moments, and a great showcase, I think, for the Scarabs. You can get the red buff. Good luck picking it up, and now you're getting locked down.
Man, and Yarkor, the more recent to get pulled back into the fight, but he has to leave, and now the Solar Scarabs have themselves a 3 versus 2. Yarkor will send some damage flying on through the fight, but none of it will connect. And the Solar Scarabs able to get in, grab the purple buff, and the Leviathans will have to leave. Expounding on that early advantage now. 1 level in mid, 1 level in jungle, 1 level in hunter as well. It's about keeping that ball rolling over the next few minutes.
Honestly, I'm surprised Inbound hasn't pulled a full level ahead so far, considering how much he's been driving this game forward. But it is just one of those things, support problems that come through, right, all the time. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. The duo lane, I mean, that's where our focus was. They've bounced back exactly the way you would have wanted, maybe and then some, to be able to keep this a little more interesting. Ooh. They're going to keep doing it.
Inbound has not missed a push-pull in like 4 or 5 straight attempts, it feels like. This Hercules is just absolutely swinging here 6 minutes in. 21-25 on the damage charts, second to highest is Inbound, immediately followed by Layers. SOT here, he's on top of the damage charts, and that's why the Leviathan's putting some pressure onto the right-hand side. The Salmon Leap is there, and SOT will dodge out the engage, but unfortunately there's just too much re-engage, and Panatom able to waltz on in, grab the wall kick, and get the Leviathans on the board.
What a good read, though. I mean, recognizing it. Granted, there's a little bit of build-up time for that leap. Still being able to juke it out, almost enough to get away with his life. Luckily, that blink came up in time for Panatom, or was available in time for Panatom. And so he felt confident about it. Speaking of confidence, nothing oozes confidence to me in a team's early game than going for the red buff invades like this on Clockwork. Granted, they've only gotten 2 out of 3. That's a success rate in most books. And so they're going to be able to get it. They don't even need to pick it up. And this is my favorite part about it is you can leave it there whether or not you want to, as like, you know, Inbound it has a purple buff right now, so he's not able to scoop it up anyway. But it's also this fresh reminder that you're just not going to be able to do anything about it if you're the Leviathans. I kind of like, again, an undertone that I'm putting on it because I like the way that feels, but it is something that kind of plays on your mind. I would say can be a little bit, not necessarily a tilter, but something that's going to at least sit there with you.
They're going in. I'm not going to get a chance to talk about it as Layers through the Cosmos drops on down. Oh no, but Baronic didn't have the last tick of damage onto Shinto, and that means Panatom closes the gap, gets a kill onto Layers, and that makes things a little bit more interesting out of the jungle here, where it was a fantastic start. Still a great start for Layers out of the jungle. But now Panatom has been able to pull back a couple of kills here in this game, even in levels. Baronic being dove in the mid lane as well, and finally Rongyu able to find some blood here in Game 3.
This is what I was a little worried about. Look, that's just a small grouping from the Leviathans. That's not necessarily a big one. Yeah, back to even.
Wow.
In all regards, essentially. I mean, even technically a little bit of gold in favor of the Leviathans now. Not enough that it's going to make a big difference, but all the early game lead, as much as you can drive it, this is the same thing I was saying for the Leviathans. It's great, but it doesn't mean a whole lot unless you can continue to compound on that. It's one of those things that really has to stack on and on itself. Early game kills don't mean a lot, especially 2 of them, now I'm looking at it, are onto the support, Rongyu. It's maybe not the best case scenario for the Scarabs. Not the worst case scenario either. They're just going to have to clean up how that 3v3 works. And we've seen Inbound and Layers hanging out together the entire game so far, at least most of the entire game. So I'm not too worried about their duo synergy. It's adding Baronic into the mix. The damage is going to be there, but they have to be very careful about the Rongyu Shinto Panatom combo that's going to be coming at them.
There's a ward on this red buff. But the Solar Scarab's not in a position to capitalize here. Panatom is absolutely playing out of his mind today, isn't he? The Daji in game number 2 ran wild. The Solar Scarabs did not have an answer for it. Now here in game number 3, Panatom off to what was a tough start. Gets first blooded at level 2 and now has jumped on back in on a killing spree here on this Gilgamesh, building in to the Transcendence, so a little bit of damage for Panatom out of that jungle. If the Leviathans were able to close this game out here, Panatom might just be player of the set.
Especially with the way he's been playing, although Julio's going to try to give him a run for his money here on this tier.
And Baronic has to thunder crash away, and Layers up to the sky, but he won't make it as Rongyu grabs the first kill of the game for himself. An assist in the back pocket there as well. Now fighting continues to happen, and of course Panatom's at the forefront. The fears flying through from Baronic, the driving strike from inbound to try to peel out for his mid laner, and the pullback is good. And what a shift we're feeling in this game now, where the Solar Scarabs were in the Leviathan side of the map, in the jungle, red buff, purple buff, effectively every single time they were up. Now the Solar Scarabs getting pushed back beneath their tier 1, tier 2 towers here in mid lane. There's just been a big shift in the win score, you feel like, over the last couple minutes.
I mean, we're starting to hit that mid-game bump that's going to be coming in favor, again, just in favor of the Leviathans' play style, not in favor of their draft, not in favor of anything other than who they are as people and the way they like to play the game. So this is something that, again, the Scarabs, this is where my concerns are going to be founded for them, and so far they're kind of proving a little bit true. I want to see a little more over the next 5 minutes to really cement this, but it's this 3v3 that's going to be coming from the Leviathans, although depending on how Julio rotates over, maybe a 4v4 that they're going to have to be able to respond to, but as well as this late game fights, when it does become full 5-on-5s, when you start seeing the Leviathans roam as a team, they get pretty deadly. They are very, very good in those combination fights. So I'm looking towards inbound. He had great peel, he's had great setup, and I think he's the driving factor. He's the life force right now of the Scarabs to me. If he can keep up the pressure, everybody can fall in line right behind him.
Shinto looking over here at inbound. He's made his way back towards the left. He'll just roam around, look for maybe a push or a pull. Unable to find it there out of the mid lane. Mid lane's been pretty quiet here. Shinto seems like just happy to farm on up here, Gore. He's finished up Spear of the Magus 1 level ahead of Baronic, despite Baronic having a kill and an assist. And that's such a quiet threat here in this game, isn't it? Shinto on this Merlin, the ability that we've seen this guy have on this specific pick, I don't think can be understated.
Yeah, last year Shinto was a phenomenal Merlin player, and what we've seen from him, even through this year, is something that you can't really scoff. Even showcased that he had a Giannis the other day, so definitely someone that you have to be worried about, stressed out about in a lot of these sets. And we saw what Vin was able to do on this Merlin pick just a week ago, and it's times like that where I really get scared of Merlin. He's supposed to just be the guy that burns you down for someone else to get the kill, not the guy that's going like 8-1 in his own rights. It's also going to be helpful. Again, you maybe don't have the best quote-unquote secure for an objective, but you've got the best burn in the game right now because of that Merlin, and that's going to help you maybe a little bit with these Scorpions. That's not necessarily what I was thinking when I started that conversation, but when the Furies start spawning in, Pyromancers, Fire Giants, things like that. Whew, it's going to be scary for the Scarabs. They're going to have to figure out a way in there. That boulder, though, from inbound, it's been one of the best steals that we've ever seen. I think it still has that potential.
Layers is quieted down here in game number 3, but a chance to liven things up a bit as Julio will use the ultimate to leap away, so he'll survive. Not ideal for what you want a Ratatosker to be doing around this point in the game, is it, Gore? Where Layer started off great. Still far from a bad game, don't get me wrong, not trying to say that, but this is where the ultimates are supposed to be flying in. You're supposed to be, getting stuff going, and not necessarily at any fault of Layers. This game just hasn't been at a pace where it feels like this Ratatosker can find that impact.
And there's no one really good for him to go in and lock down on. Yeah, like when I look at Layers, just Layer-specific gank potential, unless inbound's there, I don't think it's anybody. I think you just hang out and you hope for the best.
I'm leaving if I'm a Chiron.
Yeah,
flickering away
dash,
if I'm Merlin.
blink. I mean, Panatom has a leap. Julio is probably just going to fight you, or he's going to be able to get away if his ult's
turns
available.
around
Like,
and fights.
there's a lot of disengage from the Leviathans that make it difficult, and unless inbound can lock them down or get their beads, there's not much you're going to be able to do. And so I kind of like it. Again, hold on to the ult, use it as a disengage for yourself. I mean, as long as you're able to get up on it, we've already seen that not work once this game. But if you are able to jump up onto those branches of Yggdrasil, you can just jump right back over to the base, back to a buff, somewhere safe.
I wonder if it'll be a secondary engage tool as this game goes on, where some of the self-disengage has already gone through for the Leviathans, and then Layers kind of as a second wind in the fight will try to find an engage. Right now, he wants to be the spearhead of the initiation. Instead, it's just slowing down the Gold Fury that the Leviathans had started, but they'll back away as inbound was close by. There's a secure there with the Excavate. We've seen objectives stolen away with that one a couple of times as well. Now it's a pullback onto Yarkor. The push is there as well, but Yarkor is just going to gallop on away from this one, uses the beads to stay alive. Some fighting happening in the mid lane as well as Julio rotates over, but there won't be anything there either.
Now that those beads are down, though, Yarkor, in a much more dangerous scenario, might be able to do some and play around with the knock-up immunity that he has on Giddy Up, but with beads being gone, if he gets knocked up, then he's going to get pushed. It's going to be very easy for Inbound to find that gap. Also good for Layers if he wants to make a rotation. Granted, no ult available, so that's going to take a little while, but it gives him those opportunities to look for stuns and things like that.
This is what you need if you're the Scarabs. I mean, this game is still very close. Don't get me wrong. The Leviathans have been the ones driving the direction of the game over the last few minutes, but XP and Gold are even, if not on the Scarab side of the map a little bit. So in the parts that matter, Gold, experience, the Scarabs still dead even with the Leviathans here in game number 3. It's just felt like the Leviathans have been the one kind of calling the cards of the Scarabs a couple of times here. But that's got to feel good, right? After it was a great start for the Scarabs, things slowed down as the Leviathans started to take this game to you. Panatom was on a killing spree. And now everyone's taking a deep breath. We've been able to bring this game back to even.
I mean, you're just holding on right now if you're the Scarabs. The problem is, right now I'm starting to get a little bit more of Game 1 vibes. Like, first few minutes, definitely favorable of the Scarabs, but now, shaky.
This Gold Fury is going to be very important. Double knockup from SOT on the backline as the Cullen continues to wreak havoc. Excavate doesn't find a kill, but Zapman makes his way into the fray. Will use the beads to stay alive, but the snipe through the wall. They're good from Yarkor here, and here's that secondary engage from Layers, and that opens up the door to Baronic in the Tycho drums.
And they're going to be able to escape right now, but Julio's come over, and he's looking for blood.
Oh, there's so much going on as Yarkor grabs the double kill. Julio up and over the wall, sets that one up. Inbound desperately trying to put on the juke shoes, but he'll get the double push away, and Julio will grab the kill. Talk about the second wind in that fight, Gore. Scarabs had a little bit thanks to Layers, but then Julio showing up made a big difference.
Yeah, that bounce back from Julio joining it, and immediately, like, he knew exactly where to go. Backline, knew who he wanted to focus down and where the pressure was going to go. And I would even argue, unfortunate for Baronic, he kind of scrambles there to get out. Thunder crashes right into the waiting bow of Yarkor, able to find that shot to get the double kill. And that's given him a lot of opportunity. And I'll say, I said shades of Game 1. This is much better for the Scarabs than Game number 1 was. A lot more proactive play, especially that fight. I think that might have had more fight in it than we got to see in Games 1 and 2 combined from them. But unfortunately for them, they're just on the receiving end of too many deaths.
Yep.
And now it's trying to figure it back out. And, you know, we've been highlighting Layers, a really good early game, but he just kind of had that first blood. He hasn't really had too much since. 3 assists. He's been a part of every single kill, but he's not really the driving factor, and we've talked about that. Ratatosker's just not going to be able to. Solar or Troll, on the other hand, him and Inbound, these frontliners, will be able to create space, will be able to create fights. And I think it's starting to become more important than ever for this Cullen to show up, as well as this Hercules to continue doing what he's been doing the whole time.
I'm still feeling like he's doing his job. Gets the beats off of Yarkor, who goes into the ultimate here. Zapman will grab the kill there. But it's big CC onto Zapman on the back end, but there's just not enough damage from Wrong. You watch out, though. Shinto rotating over from mid lane. This is a Merlin's dream. The health bar is so low, and Inbound will be the first to go down as Shinto rotates over, nearly finds the double kill, but it looks like Zapman is going to delay his life just a bit longer, and Panatom drives the final hit.
Yeah, Aegis used there for Zap. Again, delays the inevitable for him. And now it's just going to be back in control. Good Thunder Crash from Baronic. Julio's not done, though.
Divine!
That's the problem. I mean, right now it has been this tier and his ability to chase people down that's causing so much trouble as well.
It was a 3v1 yet again. Did not go Solar Scarab's way in game number 2, and might have liked their chances here against Julio. Hasn't quite gotten that out of hand just yet. So you like your odds in a 3v1. But that's really the first kind of gap widening that we've seen since this game became even, where Leviathans rotate in, they grab themselves a 3-for-1. Could be a good opportunity here for the Scarabs. Julio has continued to try to run away, but SOT will snag one, and down goes the tier now for the first time this game. The ability now for the Solar Scarabs to find some pressure on the right.
Look at that, that's 45 seconds right now. You're not going to have Julio around for these engagements. Granted, there's not a lot to accomplish in those 45 seconds. It's more of a stabilization factor, but Pyromancer should be coming up shortly after Julio does. And that's going to give you a good opening if you're the Scarabs to at least start knocking down again. A couple of objectives go your way. You're not too far down out of this one. And the fight, I mean, this has been really solid for them. It's just going to be cleaning it up and, like you said, maybe dealing with that second wind that we saw earlier. If they can keep Julio locked down or locked away, one of the two, I think they're going to have a lot of options, I should say, to really create opportunities for themselves. Nothing concrete I'm still looking just at Pyromancer first. That's the first on a long checkbox, or a list of checkboxes, I should say, for them to go in their favor. Get the Pyromancer, you set yourselves up there, maybe focus on the Primal Fury, then you can start the conversation. But there's going to be at least one fight in those two objectives for the Scarabs to try and win before Fire Giant's even on the table.
It seems like it's been a game plan of the Scarabs this entire set. Early and quick Pyromancer calls. Once it was checked by the Leviathans as the Fury went down on the other side. The Solar Scarabs have been pretty consistent in looking towards those Pyromancers so far. It's helped keep that gold somewhat in contention. Zatman probably happy, Gore, with the way that Game 3 has gone instead of what happened there in Game 2, where it felt like the Heimdall was just being dove on. Not even it felt. It was literally what was happening. Zatman just couldn't function, it felt like, in Game number 2 without somebody from the Leviathans trying to jump on in there. So at 1-2-1, it's not a great KDA, but probably feels a lot better for Zatman that he's at a point in this game with build, with XP, will be able to make an impact in some of these fights. Right now, though, inbound, being bullied out a little bit by the Leviathans, half HP on this Hercules, be able to sustain up just a little bit as that important Pyromancer is respawned.
Yeah, he's going to be able to walk out alive, but because he's at 2/3 HP, maybe a little less, a little over half, it's going to make it a lot more risky to even try to go in here, and they're not even going to be able to get close enough, but they might be able to pick up Julio. No knocking up available for him, no lockdown. I'd say if I'm going all in on this Primal Fury, not to the extent if I'm the Scarabs that I would die over it, but definitely to the extent that I want to be present for the fight. But it doesn't seem like the Leviathans want to give up.
Panatom wants to fight right now, and it's Baronic who's lost half of his health, just kind of passively to the Chiron and the Gilgamesh. And so now this Raijin will have to head on back to base. There is still scale potential here, Gormizer, with the Solar Scarabs. You're in a bit of a hole as far as gold and XP go. 2,500 is the mark that we find ourselves at. But it's going to be matching that pressure of Shinto. That's going to be so difficult, I think, for Baronic, because, you know, at 104, Merlin's reached level 20. It's a 2-level lead there. Charon's coin now finished up on the back end. Even a little defense from Shinto will just keep this Merlin's uptime so much higher. So somebody from the Solar Scarabs, maybe ideally it's the Ratatoskr, is going to have to find this Merlin more consistently than the Leviathans have been finding Baronic.
And it's easy to talk about Shinto's turn and burn on objectives, but what are a solo lane or a support than two big walking objectives to burn down? I think his damage is going to be crucial for a lot of that. And Raijin, I mean, Shinto's had 2 great Raijin games in a row, showcasing exactly what Baronic's going to be capable of in a lot of these team fights. But will it happen, I think, is the bigger question.
It's a good pull from inbound onto Panatom, but Julio has joined the fight from the right-hand side. Push back from inbound, but inbound is going to have all the CC chained onto himself. 3-man knockup in the back line from SOT. Now Layers looking for the re-engage, and it's Panatom who's dunked down on, but the beads will keep him out of the air, and Panatom walks away. Now it's Rongyu throwing the ultimate down. In a ring as the Scarabs scurry on into the win. The health bar is just way too full now for the Leviathans as the chase rages on.
I mean, still going the Fearless combo, not enough to get the kill onto Layers, but SOT still falls.
Man, look at Julio just driving the Solar Scarabs on back. SOT was left alone with the Leviathans, and Julio chose to be alone with the Solar Scarabs, and the Solar Scarabs had no foot in that fight. The Primal Fury will go down, as well as the Scarab solo laner. And this one's starting to get just a bit out of hand.
I want to say, though, shout-outs to Inbound. There are a lot of moments. There should have been more deaths on the board there, but he did some good peel to make sure Julio couldn't get to the carries. Did almost cost him his own life, but luckily he knew he could get away. But at the end of the day, it's a consolation prize compared to getting a Primal Fury, being up 4,000, 5,000 gold at this point, or approaching the 5,000 mark. Again, it's not necessarily enough to swoop in and steal away a Fire Giant and absolutely start decimating the map. In fact, there's still 4 towers still standing for the Scarabs. A lot of gold potential for both the Scarabs and the Leviathans available. It's just all going to come down to whether or not they fight around the Fire Giant.
Well, here's the burn for the Leviathans. The FG is evaporating before my eyes as the Scarabs
Layers just got his ult.
Around the back end. Zatman knocked up, CC'd as the Leviathans have reset the FG, and Panatom finds the opening kill. Baronic with the Taiko drums will be able to buy some space for the Solar Scarabs, but Julio immediately fills that space as the Tears going to run down the mid laner of the Solar Scarabs. Layers over here on the right-hand side burned away by Yarkor, unless SOT has something to say about it, and he does not. Now suddenly SOT should be a bit nervous. The Leviathans find a couple of picks. Could get worse here if SOT falls under his tier 1.
Looks like he's going to have a little bit of control on it. Not a lot, though. It's only going to prolong a little bit. Look, I like the way that the Scarabs were playing early on, and wow, even a huge push right now from inbound just to make things look good for them. Unfortunately, that's going to be the deicide at some point. The biggest issue is that the communication, and that's actually where I think the entire fight breaks down for the Scarabs, and that is, I saw the minute Layers' ult comes up. That Fire Giant's at about 1/3 HP. That's a good call. Go up into your ult. But they dropped it before he started channeling it, and that's where the issue really came through. He was up in the air looking for something, looking for a fight. Baronic's in his ult looking for the fight, and the Leviathans gave up the objective because they knew they didn't need it right then. They didn't have to push their focus on it. They could just win the fight afterward, and that went swimmingly in their favor. Now they should be able to get a Phoenix pretty easily.
This won't be quick for the
Perhaps
Leviathans.
on the other side of the planet.
How many times have we seen this, though, where the have we seen a single Phoenix defense this set? Now that I think about it, I think every time we've seen the Leviathans taking a Phoenix, the Scarabs have willingly accepted just not to be there because they were going to lose the fight. This time, everyone's dead and respawning. I'm not sure we've seen one Phoenix defended. For my money, I can't remember.
Yeah, I don't know that we have. I'm trying to flash back.
The game state
one
has just prevented it. I think the
they took
Leviathans
that
have gotten enough kills.
Yeah, no, they've just been so swimmingly in the lead now. Things haven't necessarily been clapped back at them. And you know what? I will say, for late game, that might be the first place to start looking to try and control this. Because right now, I don't know if the tier 2s are going to be the spot to try and mount your defense. Right. Definitely not a Pyromancer. Maybe Primal Fury when it comes up. Definitely if a Fire Giant comes up. I think they have too good a comp to fight around a Fire Giant pit for the Scarabs to just let that through. But Phoenixes, this one withstanding, definitely need to start being able to make those mounted defenses. Because, I mean, you do it in one game, then it's arguable, okay, well, that trade, they wanted to see if it would be worthwhile, and it wasn't. Right. They've done it twice now, and I think that's going to be something that they're going to have to feel. Good backs coming through from the Scarabs this time around, because they're going to be needed over here on left.
Well, this Phoenix is going to go quickly. You hope that this is not the last stretch of gameplay for the Solar Scarabs here in the Phase 1 playoffs, but the Leviathans have something else in mind. Zapman, before my eyes, has gone missing. It's a knock-up on the backline as Yarkor's been taken low, and SOT combines with Layers for an opening kill, but Shinto never died. SOT is transformed. Inbound misses the push. His flicker there as Inbound misses everything. Shinto dodges it all. SOT, he'll die off. Baronic is going to get chased down, and Gore, it feels like the Leviathans on the verge of ending this set.
Yeah, if they can get rid of Baronic, they can get rid of a lot of the lasting pressure that's going to cause them trouble. Inbound was too busy trying to bait him away. Going to have to back this time around, but they're going to lose that Phoenix, no problem. It's all about a Titan defense.
Yeah, and it's Inbound and Baronic who got to put it up. 20 seconds left on the closest respawn, but the Leviathans will hear none of it. Yarkor isn't there, so the physical outpouring of damage maybe not as high for the Leviathans, but a 4 versus 2, a 4 versus 1 still feels pretty damn good as Baronic has to use the Aegis. He'll be pushed against the wall. Panatom rampages through this set. In one of the cleanest sets we've seen so far, Leviathans advance to the next round.
I mean, like you said, clean is the operative word. Game 3, there's a little bit of murky water at the very beginning for the Leviathans, but you can definitely feel the control throughout, well, most of, if not all of, that entire set. Game 1, a little back and forth. Game 2, overwhelmingly in their favor. Game 3, a little bit of back and forth, but they come out on top, and they get to move themselves forward. Look, the Leviathans, a team that has struggled every single playoffs, getting a win, getting a 3-0 win at that. This is a great way to start off their weekend.
Oh, it's perfect. It's perfect because the Leviathans have been a driving force so far in Season 8. Every opponent they've gone up against has had to put up their best if they're going to beat the Leviathans. And the question mark going into this weekend was always going to be, do the playoff Leviathans show up, the playoff roster of this squad show up? Or does a different team show up? And right now, it's looking like the scarier of the two options as the Leviathans make quick work of the Scarabs in our first set here of the weekend. Gore and I, not sure we need a break, but we're going to take one anyway. We'll be right back with the analysis.
butterflies on my insides have all gone away. You're not along for the danger, but I'm here to stay. I fall even deeper in the lies, they don't keep me away. You wanna know my secrets, so you keep crashing into my waves. I don't have the patience for that, not okay with waiting for that. I don't know what's changed in my head. Let's go somewhere and never come back. Tonight we lose control. No matter where we go, we're never going home. And you don't even know when I get you alone. You can lose your halo. You can lose your halo. I don't really know what you waiting for. I've been feeling low. Won't you give me, won't you give me, won't you give me?
Hello and welcome back to the SMITE Pro League, powered by Alienware. And well, Mifflin, I'm going to keep it as straight as I possibly can. This was a little bit of a blowout from the Leviathans, and unfortunately it just did not seem as though that plot armor was ever really going to take place for the Scarabs here.
Dude, that set was so fast. I'm just going to be so early for my movie later. I had this whole day blocked out. I was ready for at least 4 games out of that set, but the Leviathans were looking just a little bit too clean this time around. Early game was a little bit better from the Scarabs in Game 3. They got their feet under them, but they were not able to transition into a mid-game lead, and that's something you have to do against a team like the Leviathans.
Beneatham just seemed like he was on his A game today, and you could probably say the same for the entirety of this Leviathans roster. They were just firing off on all cylinders, and anytime there looked like there was going to be a gap in their gameplay, someone else just stepped up to the plate.
Just every single time, man. Yarkor has some great rotations as well. There was a turnaround double kill. I think it was around the 15-16 minute mark. This might be it legitimately. Okay, accidents happen sometimes. I promise that wasn't planned. And then from there, it just felt like the Leviathans had complete control, largely due in fact to their objective control through the burn that Merlin has afforded.
I'm glad that you brought up Hardcore as well, because he certainly had a set for himself, and there's a reason why he has been the talk of the town as of late in the SMITE Pro League, and if this set isn't more of a solidifying factor that he means business, I don't know what else to say, Mifflin.
Yeah, ban is Chiron. Let's see if he could do this level of aggression on another pick. Chiron is one of the best early game aggression hunters in the game, and he was allowed to have it all 3 games this set, and all 3 games this set he has a great performance. There might be a little bit of a correlation there. Maybe some other teams need to take some note.
And at the start, I was not skeptical necessarily, but a bit concerned that the Leviathans might have been placing too much of an emphasis surrounding that early to mid-game, but they certainly seemed like that was more than practice play from them. And going forward even, now looking at the bracket for these playoff stages, as you can see, Atlantis Leviathans are going to be advancing. They'll be meeting the Olympus Bolts in their semifinals matchup, but coming up next in that Match 2 debut, it's going to be down to Jade Dragons or the Tartarus Titans to see who comes out on top for that Oni Warriors.
Man, coming up against the Oni Warriors does not feel good, right? It doesn't feel good to step up to the Bolts either. It feels like whoever wins this set is only going to have a longer, harder journey trying to work their way into the finals. But coming up, man, I'm just so excited to get a chance to talk to some of these guys from the last set.
Well, speaking of the come-up, actually, who we just highlighted right now, Hardcore, he's going to be joining us for this post-game interview. And Hardcore, I'll start you off hot. Felicidades to you and the rest of the team. And now, knowing that your next matchup is going to be the Olympus Bolts, what are some of your thoughts surrounding that?
I think we already know that we're going to play against the Bolts again. And I think we're feeling really confident into that set. We have been, I think, struggle against them a lot in the past year and in this year. We beat them in the first week, like our first matchup, this year. We beat them 2-0, and they have been losing against them. So it will be an interesting matchup for sure.
Definitely going to be a little bit of a barn burner between you two. But looking back on this set specifically, were you at all surprised that you were able to get Chiron as often as you did?
I don't know. I see people are when it comes to drafts, people love to ban Rangu, and I think they have to because either way, if you don't ban he's gonna win you the game. But doing that, you left a lot of things open for us. So we're happy to take every single trade if they want to draft like that. And I think we just draft better and we just play better, and that's it.
So safe to say that you guys all have a lot of confidence in each other. It seems really evident in your gameplay. So for you specifically, going forward, what do you think are going to be some of the bigger team challenges to overcome?
Um, I don't know. I think every single day is a challenge. So like every single thing, I feel is a challenge for us. Today was a challenge and we beat it. Tomorrow will be a challenge and we will see what is going on and what day at a time we'll try just to win and keep improving.
Well, we're all certainly looking forward to seeing what you guys have up for us next in that Olympus Bolt set. One more time, congratulations to you and the rest of the team. And
Thank you.
I guess you guys make sure to take time to celebrate because that was a very strong victory coming from you guys.
Yeah, it was.
Such a nice guy, man. Hardcore really he just knows what it's all about. For real, Hardcore, thank you so much for joining us here on the post-game interview, man. For real, I meant it when I said that the team, hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. But for you guys back at home, make sure you stay tuned because we'll be right back with set number 2 between the Jade Dragons and those Tartarus Titans, and you're not going to want to miss out.